Chapter 464 A Night in a Tree. Many big thanks to @Darkenlin on Patreon. Zane was back in Hammerfell. It may come as a shock, but those who are involved will turn every stone to find him and understand what's going. As dangerous as Zane is, Jon was preparing his weapons and the rest of his gear when he started remembering how it all began. He wanted to keep Azura's star away from her influence, but instead, HR caused her divinity to be wounded. The fragment of Azura that was in the star drifted through the seas of oblivion to end up in the hands of Mannimarco, who used it to fuel the ghost world and create an army of the dead for his cult. Things looked bleak for Jon when he was told that when a Daedra is offended, their retribution is a labor that must be done, else the offender will be damned forever in oblivion. The first labor, and one of the most dangerous ones, if he had to argue, was to help Isha go through the Shivering Isles, the realm of the mad god Sheogorath, and slay El Diablo. His friend Jon Battleborn was possessed by El Diablo, who happened to be a gigantic Daedric chicken that caused some sort of chicken madness in Riverwood. The labor was done without even Jon knowing it was a labor. He was even named the nephew of Sheogorath by a blind, idiotic mistake. The second labor marked the demise of Jon Dare. The true retribution came when the envious Thane Erikr of Hafingar's solitude baited Jon by his brother Wulfr, who was led to a forsworn ambush. Jon managed to arrive in time as Wulfr was about to meet his end and saved the day, but in a desperate attempt, the forsworn leader Alaric brought a mountain on the head of Jon Dare. The third labor was to escape the Forsworn and avenge himself. Jon was desperate and in a bad shape after losing a foot, a few fingers and parts of his face, as well as being trapped in a briarheart tree sucking away his life force. He managed to resist and survive for 2 months as he learned to feed on the tree in reverse. The tree mutated itself to the anomaly trapped in it, and a certain vine grew attached to Jon after sharing his astral energy. Jon managed to break free as he devoured all the trees in the Briarheart Grove, and as he escaped, he was forced to kill forsworn children in the process as well as Alaric's brother. Jon escaped to Markarth, but he had that Briarheart vine leeching on him and locking away his magicka. Desperate, Jon made a deal with Molag Bal, the nearest Daedric prince around, and met the Draemora Xikil. In order to attain revenge, Jon's only power was the mace of Molag Bal and the Thursdayum he can shout. With just that, Jon obliterated the Forsworn in 2 separate battles, most notably the Battle of Forsworn Jon Dare that revealed his identity in Skyrim as Jon Hild Firemane, the taboo child of Clan Firemane. In the last moments of the battle, Jon performed the Blood Eagle ritual execution on Alaric, offering his soul to Molag Bal. Now that Molag received the souls and helped Jon attain his vengeance, he tricked Jon and sent his lieutenant vampire Lord Harkon Fokihar to collect Jon. The fourth labor was to escape Fokihar and save Winterhold from imminent danger. Jon broke free from the shackles of the Briarheart vine after killing Alaric. He was taken by the vampire Lord Harkon to find his long-lost daughter Serana, who carries an important secret. Jon finds Serana and gets dragged to oblivion in the realm of Molag Bal, called Harbor, to find the location of Harkon's wife. Jon convinced Serana to help him escape with Elder Scroll she had and reunited with his favorite Draemora, Xikil. Later on, he met with Sir Caldwell and together they broke the Hollow City free from Cald Harbor, turned Xikil from a mere Draemora into a Daedric Titan, and created a very powerful staff through the power of an Elder Scroll. It was called the Elder Staff of Power and Fate, Pride. Later on, Jon escapes Cald Harbor, returns to Winterhold, heals himself fully and meets the united power of the Nordic clans and 10 Thalmor arch-wizards, slaying them all and letting the Nords go free. He did so by tapping into the universal power of the Orbis and having a glimpse at the Tower of Chim. The fifth labor was to retrieve a Daedric weapon. He had to flee Skyrim to ease up the atmosphere after slaughtering so many. He was officially exiled, but it was a deal with the king to prevent Skyrim from any imperial oppression to affect the politics or the economy. Jon traveled to Whiterun, met some Morag Tong Sel, and found out that the weapon he is after is the most infamous ebony blade. Using his knowledge of the game, Jon stole it and rode to the eastern borders of Skyrim, where he had to meet with his old friend Isha from the first labor. The sixth labor was a joint effort between the labors of Azura, Boethiah and Mephala, Jon, Isha and the twins Miran and Miranda. They were to serve the old woman of Mournhold, who put them under the leadership of Boethiah's champion, Gollum. Many events happened, but in the end, Gollum came out as a traitor and Jon replaced him as the champion of Boethiah by slaying him and taking his armor, the ebony mail. Also, the old woman revealed himself to be the old Queen Berenzia, former queen of Morrowind and Wayrest. She rewarded Jon with the boots of the Apostle and the old man's coin, artifacts of the founding Emperor Tiber Septim. The seventh labor was to follow Isha. Mysterious as it sounded, Jon followed her across Cyrodiil and entered the Imperial City with his real identity to meet one of his lovers, the Toria Vici, and become the grand champion of the Imperial Arena by slaying Darius. Afterward, he fled the Empire to Hammerfell to find that Isha's brother, Zane, was long since dead. Isha fell to agony, but Jon investigated, finding out traces of Sithis, Mannimarco and the Worm cult in the Alakar Desert. Jon traveled outside the world through the chaotic realms of the Abyss to find a ghost world drifted away from another universe and was used by Mannimarco to lock away Azura's divine fragment and an army of liches and undead. Jon destroyed everything in his wake and returned to Isha, who insisted on leaving Hammerfell. 8 months later, they were in Elsewhere practicing martial arts when a certain curse struck the borders of Elsewhere. Investigating, Jon and his group found out that Isha's brother, who was long thought to be dead, is the culprit. They chased him to Sylvanar, where he attacked Sylvanar Thoron to gain access to his grot oak tree and take out an artifact of necromancy. The group had to fight both the Green Lady of Valenwood and the Mane of Elsewhere, as well as an elven ancestor from Alinar. After investigating, Zane seems to have returned to Hammerfell. And that's the recap. Homan, I was there the whole time. Why do I have to hear you nagging about it? Because, my dear cat, I need someone to talk to. Also, remembering things like that before the finale is more dramatic, even if you see it unnecessary. The finale? What makes you so sure? Because everyone is fed up with these labors and I miss Skyrim so much. Don't you miss Alina, Jullinar and the rest? No. Don't you miss the babies? Looks away. I knew it. Jon smiled. Wolf and Jorna should have a child by now. Also, Thor and Iden should have grown this much. Humph. Jon and Nefertiti were sitting together on a branch of the great grot oak of Sylvanar. A trip to Hammerfell from here will need a lot to stock on. Also, Miran and Miranda seem to have some business, such as notifying their master that they are on a trip and so on. Jon and Nefertiti spent the night together on a branch, staring at the moons. Back in the great grot oak of Sylvanar, the Altmare ancestor sat alone in a room provided by the hosts. Last night, she who has lived for centuries felt for the first time in her life that she was a forgotten page in history. The elves of the Aldmeri Dominion may have always been viewed as fanatics, but she was one of the few who was there since the beginning of it all. Ancient she may be, but as the Altmere society progressed, they always valued the advice of the old, taking pride in it that they are the eldest of races, the most knowledgeable and wise across the ages. But is any of that true? The elves always proved to be superior, but the humans were there on every turn taking glory. Even though those very humans always follow the path of the missing god through wars and destruction. Ruling Tamriel through Cyrodiil is the ultimate goal of all races. The humans kept the ruby throne for 4 millennials with no elf ever succeeding to reach it. Even though they claimed greatness, the High Elves almost damned the world to oblivion twice and caused damage that no man could do. The Plane Meld by Mannimarco and the Oblivion Crisis by Mankar Cameron. Both were Altmare, both opened the apocalypse gates to drag this world to oblivion. Compared to them, The men were blessed with heroes and divine powers. Saint Alessia, Remand Cyrodiil, Tiber Septim, the eternal champion, the hero of Kratch, and finally there is talk about a man acquiring the tools of Kagrenac and becoming a demigod in Skyrim. Just where is this world getting itself dragged to this time? She wondered. She tried to close her eyes, but as she did, she saw that scene once again, and her heart ached. Blood, fire and brass on an elven grove of cherry blossoms. The day her world burned when that tyrant marched to Alinar flying alongside the walking brass colossus. Every step the walking brass took left behind him a version of reality distorted and broken. She had to end it, kill Tiber Septim and shatter his totem, but that was a mere dream. She descended upon him with every Altmare ancestor there is. A man floating midair alone with a red legion and a brass tower faced them all by himself. No elven ancestor lasted more than a couple of sword strikes against him. She was the last to fall, and his sword had already cut deep in her. The last she saw was a walking tower laying waste to a mountain, removing it from existence. Then she remembers dying, but she didn't. She couldn't help but wonder how she survived since that day, but part of her knew of a dire truth. Something that shouldn't even have happened has affected her. She died, but she didn't, because both realities happened. A dragon break. A series of temporal bifurcations leading to her death in a timeline, her escape in another, as well as many timelines where she is still fighting against Tiber Septim and the Numidium. It is why she is a weak ancestor. She was never whole since that day. Once that Nord teenager managed to pressure her in the fight last night, she felt a connection to those absent selves of hers once again. Her many versions, scattered across time, fighting the bitter fight, were all in the same mental resonation for the first time in years. But once that needle sword almost claimed her life from the very same spot she was stabbed by Tiber Septim, she lost all connection with her other selves. If she managed to fight more, the resonation would have increased, and she would have grown stronger with just fighting, but that is no longer possible. She can't go backward or forward. She can't achieve the level every ancestor seeks, and break from the rules of the world to travel back to Etherius and join the other ancestors. She is just miserable. In this misery, she couldn't help but turn around and look at the door to her room. "You have been there for an hour now, just come in," she spoke. Her words were met with silence for a minute until her door was opened. "You two must have something to say." She spoke to the Altmare young man and woman whose faces were solid like stones. They exchanged stares at her until the man tossed some medallion towards her. She took it, getting her fingers, and looked at it closely. It was a medallion carrying the eagle sigil of the first Aldmeri Dominion. On its back was engraved the name of Aaron Arana Aldmeri, founder of the First Dominion. "The sigil of Her Most Magnificent Highness." She spoke, then looked at the two. "So you are the last two descendants." "Mirren." "Miranda." They both spoke out their names. "I see." She nodded. "I remember saving your father and mother from prosecution 160 years ago in Sentinel. We were told, the night of green fire," Mirren said. "For E42, the Thalmor royal family was hunted almost to extinction by the new Thalmor government for the crime of bending the knee to the Empire. The royal family dissidents who had fled to Sentinel from the Thalmor were attacked by Thalmor operative. Their efforts to fight back against the Thalmor were in vain, and by the time Imperial Legion soldiers arrive, the entire refugee district of the city had been destroyed. The event became known as the Night of Green Fire due to the destructive magic attacks employed by both sides during the battle. Our parents told us that when they were children, they were saved by the white ancestor of the Misty Hills. We came to pay respect." Miranda spoke. "I understand. How are your parents?" the white ancestor asked. "Dead." "I am sorry." The white ancestor looked away, thinking of how she outlived the younger generations once again. "Do you wish to avenge them?" she asked. "No." Miranda shook her head. "Our parents forbade vengeance on us," Mirren continued. Shame. Alinar could have used saviors. The white ancestor said, and tossed back the medallion to Mirren. Just make sure that the blood of Queen Erin remains. No blood on Tamriel is superior to yours. Unforeseen children. Current goal, 5 extra chapters. Next goal, 6 extra chapters. Pat/Rayon. com/Eldokmizi, remove/. PayPal, plus $10 equals extra. Money with wings, money with wings. PayPal. me/Eldokmizi. Extras by votes. 5,000/8,000 ballot box with check. Discord. GG/GKCKVA7S left speech bubble. Twitter @Eldokmizi22 bird. Chapter 465 Xikil's Airlines. People, early access is now available. Next chapter is available on Patreon. I'll make sure to stock more. By the next day, the group was gathering in front of the main gate of the city of Sylvanar. The road was clear and both the Sylvanar and the Green Lady were present as well as the Mane and the White Ancestor. I can't do more but thank you and present you these gifts, Lady Isha. You are a welcome exception in Sylvanar. Sylvanar Thoron spoke to Isha after glancing at Jon. Even the Green Lady Norrell nodded to her in acknowledgement. Thank you. The couple showed a good attitude towards Isha, which is a good thing coming from the supreme rulers of Valenwood. On the other hand, Jon received their contempt as they glared at him from the side. Jon casually replied with a middle finger. Understanding his level of power, even the elite guards didn't want to meet eyes with him, so naturally he could do whatever he wants unless the power couple stand up for him. On the other hand, someone was really interested in Jon. Friend Krylin, you can't leave now. We still didn't have our spar. Mane Topaz spoke. Dear Mane, I would take you on any day, but we wasted as much time as it is. Zane should have already started wreaking havoc in Hammerfell at this rate. Such a shame. Fine, this one will come visit you one day. Where do you live? In Skyrim, I stay in Winterhold. In Elsewhere, I stay in Orcrest. In Hammerfell, I stay at the Citadel of Ebenarm. In Morrowind, I stay at Mournhold. In Cyrodiil, I stay at the Imperial City. In Oblivion, I stay at the Shivering Isles. Look, if you are close to any of those, ask about me. In any case, I'll be sending you a postcard of my whereabouts as soon as this matter is over. Moons shine. You really are an international celebrity, Krylin. Even the Thalmor intelligence has no fixed location on you. Huh. These amateurs. Jon and the Mane seem to be hitting it well. By the way, this one is wondering how will you do it. We can send some Thalmor operatives to your aid, but we can't move directly against that fellow Zane. The Mane said. We have a lot of allies in Hammerfell, and we don't really mix well with your Thalmor. However, there is a thing you can do. And what is that? You can put him on your most wanted list, just below that fellow Jon Dare. Also, do me a favor and push Jon Dare to the top of the list. Jon said with a mischievous face. Fu. This one will see what he can do. Jon may have just used his connections to push himself to the top of the Thalmor most wanted list, so Mirren and Miranda were looking at him with dubious eyes. What? I'm a sore loser, get over it. Meanwhile, the group have finished up packing and waited for the mages to open up a portal to Hammerfell. The situation took a bit of time, but it was normal for such a long-distance portal to open, until it took a bit too long. What's wrong with your mages, Sylvanar? Aren't they a bit too lax with practicing space magic? Jon asked. These are the best high mages in Valenwood. If you can do better alone, you are welcome to try. Sylvanar Thoron retorted. Fine. Jon took out his staff and walked between the mages, then synchronized his magic with them and started casting. A minute passed. Something is wrong, Jon blurted quietly. Ah ha ha ha. The Green Lady let out a fake laugh. What is wrong, Nord? You were just talk after all? Woman, pleasure us with your silence. Jon fired back. Let me see. The white ancestor walked past Jon and checked the portal spell herself. Something is indeed wrong, she said. The situation became weird. No one has figured out why the teleportation distance was not getting registered in the spell. The space may be sealed, the white ancestor said. Around the whole damn Hammerfell? Jon doubted. It is possible in theory, she said. The situation was unprecedented. Sealing space is a hard thing to do, let alone sealing the space around a whole country. I will do a divination, the Green Lady said, and turned around to enter a grove not too far away. The others waited and started discussing the details. For such a select group of people to struggle with opening a portal, no matter what the method was used, it should be interesting to find out. An hour later, she came out panting and supporting herself on the trees. Norrell, what in oblivion did you go through? Her appearance was miserable, as if she has gone through the fight with Jon all over again. The others were shocked and hurried to her, but she took time to catch her breath before she speaks, and when she spoke, she gave the others a very bad feeling. Darkness, something bad is awakening in Hammerfell. It feeds on souls, she said. By all means. Jon walked closer, asking her to continue. I don't know what is that. It is veiling most of Hammerfell and gathering the souls of the dead. Someone is casting a massive spell, she said. A spell of such a caliber was only seen back during the Tiber Wars. The white ancestor said, once, a slowed necromancer called Ngasta managed to create a soul snare spell around the whole Hammerfell. Soul snare? Mirren asked. A large-scale soul trap matrix that can soul trap anything that dies around a certain area. The spell that Ngasta created surely covered a large part of Hammerfell. Jon confirmed. In theory, if you manage to tweak such a spell, you can interfere with anyone trying to enter Hammerfell through teleportation by disturbing the mental connection, the white ancestor said. I think you are right, Jon added. The necromancer Ngasta was last seen in Stros, so the core of his spell must be there. This is getting more complicated than what we thought, Isha said. Imagine a last labor for a man of Krylan's caliber. This should be a global disaster. Mirren sarcastically remarked. Not funny. I just want to finish this nasty labor business and go home. Jon shouted. Jon felt depressed now that the matter was getting more complicated by the second. What will you do, friend Krylan? This one can arrange you a portal to the nearest spot possible to Hammerfell, or even some escort if you are taking the road. The Mane said. Thank you, High Fluff, but I have my own method. I'll be seeing you once all of this is over. Jon said farewells to the Mane. The others ones said their brief farewells, but Jon had one man to say farewell to. Ilvirios, my dear guide, here is the rest of your pay. Jon tossed a bag of coin to Ilvirios Ulriric, the one who guided him through Elsewhere and Valenwood. A pleasure working with you. Hope to see you again. You as well. Farewell. Godspeed. Jon gathered with his group and took out the carriage from the cube. They went in before Jon and he came to a certain spot at the carriage and pressed a button. I always wanted to use that, he said. Jon's carriage was equipped with various things, but this one was simply two large handles matter with reinforced materials coming from the top of the carriage. The others kept watching and waiting to see what absurdity will happen this time. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you today's carriage animal. Enthusiastic drum sound. Xikil. The void around Jon distorted, taking a gigantic form, and the veil of oblivion let through a large being. A feeling of dread and helplessness took over the main gate of Sylvanar. Those who were weak gave in and fell to their knees, hanging on a fine thread of sanity, but those who were strong took deep breaths and backed away. Xikil may have been a miserable Draymora before, but now he is a Daedric Titan thanks to Jon, and only Jon can bully him. Xikil's current power can put the white ancestor to disadvantage easily. Jon said something to Xikil and the latter couldn't help but drop his shoulders and obey Jon. He held to the two large handles above the carriage and waited for Jon's next order. Jon stood on the step leading inside the carriage and looked back at the mane, the Sylvanar, the Green Lady and the White Ancestor whose faces were showing hints of realization. He then spoke in the most dramatic way he could muster. "Ladies and gentlemen, in this daunting moment of scratching your brains raw wondering how in the absolute fuckery did this come to be, I can't help but find myself quoting from Sir Alexander Dumas. How did I escape? With difficulty. How did I plan this moment? With pleasure. Xikil, stomp the gas, my good Titan. Reach me those clouds." Growl. Hearing Jon's speech, even Xikil was in a good mood to get out of here. He flapped his gigantic wings and carried the carriage up with Jon, who was waving down at the people looking at him. He rose up and faded in the sky, heading northwest. Back in front of Sylvanar, the air remained frozen as the mane, the Green Lady and the Sylvanar felt like they saw a ghost. A Nord, a tall Nord with red hair that can summon a Daedric Titan. The Green Lady remembered some report. Please, don't tell me it is him. The Sylvanar also was familiar with the report. Wahahahaha. The mane couldn't help but to hold his stomach and roll on the ground. Just right now, they all realized they just come across Jon Dare. The Jon Dare. Few airlines can be considered fancy in the world, but surely Xikil Airlines was a revolution in the field. Xikil's flight speed in open air exceeded that Vulture Griffin of the Green Lady. Not a few hours passed and they flew past Valenwood's Volquassen, the Tempest Island, Cyrodiil's Anvil and entered the Abyssinian Sea from the Gold Coast. It then took them another couple of days to get a clear look of Stros Mkai. Stros Mkai, also called Sanloa Mkai in Yoku, meaning Sister of Thought, is an important tropical island off the southern coast of Hammerfell near the Cape of the Blue Divide. It is renowned for the completely steam-powered Dwemer ruins of Bzark and the observatory of similar design containing a telescope and orrery. Much of Stros Mkai's area is taken up by the city of Port Hunding, which has also been called Stros Mkai at times. Its most famous landmarks include a statue of Frandar Hunding in the harbor and a great palace to house the city's ruler. The small settlement of Saintsport is found at the southern tip of the island. There are very few other settlements, apart from the nomadic Redguard campsite. The group landed not too far from the island, but Jon maintained coverage and snuck inside the island away from the city port, yet despite his efforts, someone was waiting for him. "We have been expecting you, Jon Dare." Priestess Urania met him at the shore. Current goal: 4 extra chapters. Next goal: 5 extra chapters. Patreon. com/Eldokmizi, remove. PayPal, plus $10 equals extra. Money with wings. PayPal. me/Eldokmizi. Extras by votes. 5,000/8,000 ballot box with check. Discord. GG/GKCKVA7S left speech bubble. Twitter at Eldokmizi22 bird. Chapter 466, Stros Mkai. This is gold. 5 extra large with fries and coke to at SpaceGhost69, at Sakage, at the Bjorns, at Valindrel, at Christian Henkenmeyer. Is available on P4 Tray 0N. "We have been expecting you, Jon Dare," said Priestess Urania, Prophet of Azura. "Long time no see, Urania. You sure look skinny. Azura must have been sending you on too many errands lately. How are things, woman?" Jon bypassed formalities, held Urania by the shoulders and hugged her. She felt strange and uncomfortable, but when Jon let her go, she was already out of breath. "Sorry, a bit excited to see you. Is there any update on my labor? A new riddle? A mystery? Or you finally are going bow point me to a spot where smash some skulls?" Jon asked. Behind him, the other 3 crawled out of the carriage, and Mirren started throwing up. Jon looked back and nodded. They seemed to be skysick. 3 days of flying are hard indeed. Do you have any mint, Arania? She sighed and massaged her temples, remembering how mind-consuming it is to deal with Jon. The situation is more complicated than it should be. Lady Azura has directed me here with a set of tasks for you, Jon Dare. Arania said. Okay. I'm all ears. Escort me to Saint's Port. The prophetess of Boethiah is waiting for us over there, she said. Excuse me. Isha stood up, supporting herself on her spear after being dizzy from Xikil's terrible landing. Rest now, Isha. Jon gave her a hand. No. She refused and walked to Arania. Tell me what you know. What is going on with Zane and why is he acting like that? It was the first time she met someone connected to the Daedra after she found out her brother was alive. This was her first chance to inquire about what's going on. The Maiden of Bitter Mercy, so it is you. Arania glanced at the spear Isha had and made a grim face. Thanks to the investigation conducted by Jon Dare, we found out that your brother is also laboring for Clavicus Vile as soon as you did. Right now, we don't know how much he is involved with the worm cult or what is their goal. The only one who knows more than us is the prophetess of Boethiah, currently in Saint's Port. She was doing a divination for a year about this case. Arania seemed serious about what she said. The party of four understood that they are jumping right in the middle of action after that unsettling flight. I understand, Jon said. He looked at the sky and narrowed his eyes. The horizon was abnormally bleak. Arania, what do you know? He asked. She stood beside him, looking at the murky sky. It all started 5 days ago. 5 days ago, on the 3rd of Rain's Hand, April, Arania was teleported by Azura's power to Hammerfell. It was a normal day until the sky started to darken abnormally and fear struck the hearts of people. Not knowing why or how, the undead sightings started to increase dramatically to the point where some villages were raided by undead and necromancers. Those who know history recalled the event when the sky darkened in gloom, just like that, and dated it to the years of the Redguard resistance led by the hero Cyrus against Tiber Septim. This was the Soul Snare spell. A spell that can take the souls of any dead and trap it by the caster's wish. On the same day, the Order of Arche and the Citadel of Ebenarm sent out their fighting priests and battle lords to defend the lands from the threat of necromancers. All the cities and towns closed their doors and fortified their walls. The raids increased by each day and the situation became serious. Some tried to track the source of the Soul Snare spell to Stros, some parts in the Alakar Desert, near Sentinel and some other places, but no one managed to survive these errands. Even the Empire moved the 7th Legion under the command of a general to secure the borders. Yesterday, most of the connection means between major cities were cut as the Soul Snare matrix hindered many magics that rely on mental connection, such as conjuration, telepathy, and teleportation. In short, the situation is dire. Right now, we cooperated with some factions to fend off the necromancers from some places, but the bigger picture is not looking good. I see. Jon nodded. I am not certain what goal does Zane have, but he is serving both the Worm Cult and Clavicus Vile. Isha, I am sorry, but we have a bigger hurdle than we anticipated. It's okay. I am just going to help, but when my brother shows up, leave him to me, she said. Are you sure? Mirren asked. We will support you, Miranda insisted. Just leave him to me. I must confirm something, she said. It's all right. We will only watch your back. Jon patted her shoulder and sighed. He then looked at his companions and a sense of guilt overtook him. They were all laborers and did a lot to rid themselves of the Daedra's dominance, but now they are dragged back to his labors. Guys, this is my labor. I am sorry to drag you into this, so if you can just find a place to rest, I'll go sort things out. I am really. We're doing this too. Mirren spoke out. Yes. We have already decided to help you out before we even leave Morrowind, Miranda said. Isha looked at Jon and sighed. And I can't simply walk out of this one, she said. Jon looked solemn and nodded as he looked away. Now that I think about it, whatever I am dragging you in now is nothing compared to what is going to happen a year from now, Jon said and smiled. Fuck off, man. Mirren didn't feel good about the way Jon smiled. Now as his mood improved, Jon turned to Urania. What is the plan? He asked. I don't need a vision from Lady Azura to tell you. Break the soul's snare and stop Zane somehow, she said. Sounds simple, but I was asking about what should we do now, right? I am heading to Saintsport village nearby. The vision led me here to meet you, but we need to start from somewhere. Escort me to Saintsport, rest for a few hours, meet Boethiah's prophetess, then see how she directs us. Urania said, and turned around for her mule that was tied nearby. Oh, by the way. She stopped and looked for Jon. The road to Saintsport is filled with undead and necromancers. Prepare to fight. Jon and the others looked at each other and nodded. A team fight. What's the formation? Mirren asked. Jon will handle the numbers as usual, Isha said. No problem. You will be the rear guard, Jon said. Indeed. My brother will kill the strong enemies and I will scout. Miranda finished the formation. I feel good about this, Jon said and checked his options through the staff. I can barely summon anything from Oblivion, but necromancy is running wild. He waved his staff in a cool way and the void started distorting everywhere. Almost 100 Wrathmen appeared and gathered around Jon. He wasn't using Wrath early on to not attract bad attention. You will use necromancy and dark magic. I have learned a lot of bad guy spells from the tomes I looted in the ghost world. Looking forward to it. The gloomy sky over Hammerfell didn't spare even a lonely island such as Stros. This darkness brought about fear and undead in every part of the island. Small villages around the island were wiped from existence. Armies would loot and raid, but the undead only kill and kill and kill. Dead children, dead women, dead elderly and dead men were all gathered in piles for the necromancers to practice on. The Worm cult has officially started a full-on attack at Hammerfell. In a tiny agricultural village on the road to Saintsport, a cult officer gathered some acolytes in the center of the village to see how their practice is going. Listen, you mutts. To reach a good position in the cult you need to control not only many undead, but also good ones. Worm zombies are good, but you need to master the formula to create them out of dead bodies and control as much as you can. The officer said. The acolytes around him nodded. Good. As an officer, I can control up to 25 undead perfectly. If I put more effort, I can even reach 40. Wow! 40! Amazing! The acolytes were taken aback by their boastful superior. Now, no need to be shocked. Others can do better. The important thing is to practice. See these bodies? Extract the skeletons, make worm zombies or flesh atranax for all I care about. The important thing is to control as much as you can. Now get to work, he said. The acolytes were excited to make good undead out of these corpses of villagers. They can have nice lives once they reach the rank of their officer in charge. The best of those acolytes can control up to 10 undead after all. Seeing the acolytes work hard, the officer retreated to a house he is stationed in. It has been years since he joined the cult, but a lot of times has passed, and he still wasn't allowed to summon a single undead from the realms of Lord Mannimarco. He always heard and dreamt about having one of those custom-made undead, but he never got the qualifications to command one and was left to train those mediocre acolytes. Things were miserable, but he had a firm belief that maybe, just maybe, one day, a good acolyte will rise among his group and help him get some rewards and benefits to boost his standing in the cult. And lo and behold, this moment was right in front of him. It was a certain undead roaming the village they were in. This undead was as what he can describe as a product of quality. Finally, he got his hands on a talent. Wait, stop. Who did this? Who made that undead? He ran out of the house, shouting as soon as he spotted that undead. It had some air to it, looking all warrior-like, wearing old armor and holding a big axe. Its bones glowed in violet hue, but that wasn't anything to bother with right now. The one who made such a powerful undead, a genius without any doubts. "Which one of you made this?" the officer asked his acolytes, who looked clueless. "We never saw such an undead before, so we thought it is yours, sir," an acolyte replied. "What? No, it is not mine," the officer denied and turned to the undead behind him. "What are you?" He looked closer, then started to check the undead in front of him. But something happened. In one move, the undead moved its axe and beheaded the man. Silence, utter silence took over the acolytes as soon as they looked behind that undead. There was a large number from the same type of undead marching to the village from the south. More from the west, some from the east. The acolytes were terrified as they looked to the north only to see one man in full ebony armor. He walked towards them alone. "Good day. I was wondering if I can have some directions to Saintsport village," he spoke. Hearing the man, the shivering acolytes only pointed to the northeast. "Oh, thank you for your kindness and sorry about your friend," the man said and turned to walk away, but then he paused and turned to them again. "Almost forgot, you are cult scum. I have to kill you," he said, raising up his staff. "Sorry." His staff descended on the ground, sending a magic wave beneath their feet. By the next second, spikes of bone rose up from the ground. Boneyard. Most of the acolytes forfeited their lives to this spell. Those who survived started running around. "Nope. You're not leaving." Jon swung his staff to the side with a death scythe emerging from it, harvesting the lives of every acolyte on the range of 5 meters. Grim scythe. 2 acolytes remained. One fell on his ass wetting himself and the other ran towards Jon with a knife. Jon simply cast a spell that shot out a skull towards the attacking acolyte and killed him on the spot. Bone spirit. The last acolyte was crying and begging for his life, but Jon felt annoyed by him. "Don't worry, you will talk and you will die. I don't play with my prey," Jon said, taking out a lust. P4 Tray 0N. Shorterl. @/QRKRS. PayPal for gift. Shorterl. @/DKYBM. Discord. GG/GKCKVA7S. Chapter 467 Little Boethiah, on P4 TRE0N. The desert land of Hammerfell was a source of inspiration to many artists and poets in years. So to say, seeing the bright land that always bathed in sunlight covered under thick layers of gloom was very disturbing. It is as if the world has lost its colors and became paler and paler. Even the heat of the desert went away, replaced by the cold winds carrying the stench of death. "Jon, have you found any survivors?" Mirren called. "No. Everyone was slaughtered way before I got here," Jon said as he checked with a detect spell. "Fucking oblivion. They didn't even spare young kids." Mirren looked at Child's corpse with a grim face. Jon and Isha felt a mental strain from the scene. Such a crime can't be forgiven. They know that because they bore such a crime before. "Disintegrate the corpses?" Priestess Urania spoke from the back. "What?" Mirren retorted. "Disintegrate them? These were people. With just some magic spells we can give them a proper burial in a minute. Ain't I right, Jon?" Jon didn't reply and looked away with a solemn face. Burying the dead is no longer an option. The soul snare spell doesn't just gloom the sky and disturb some magic, it makes the dead walk again. Urania said. As it seemed, this spell is more sinister than it already is. Jon didn't like disintegrating the dead, but he just had to do it. Those who died would rather turn into white ash just like that and scatter with the wind instead of rising again in agony as zombies. The past 5 days caused the Redguard to start burning the fallen, as Urania mentioned. It wasn't the way Redguards did things, but it was the only choice. No one wanted to die under the effect of the soul snare. "What have you found from the prisoner you took?" Arania asked Jon. "Not much. Most operatives of the worm cult were pulled from all the worm cells around Tamriel to join some important ritual. But the curious thing is that this soul snare matrix wasn't their plan A," Jon said. "What do you mean?" Isha asked. "From what I put together, their plan A was to power up some sort of a ritual by the divine fragment of Azura that I freed from the ghost world. Now that I have disturbed plan A, plan B was put into action by gathering as many souls as they can. That's why they used the soul snare," Jon said. "I sort of get it," Arania said. "So, the worm cult lost their source of power and now are violently looking for a new one." "Yes. They always acted quietly, but their impulsive actions only mean one thing," Jon remarked. "What is that?" Arania seemed curious. The others fell into thoughts, but Miranda spoke. "They are running low on time," she said. "Indeed," Jon agreed, "they have a certain time limit they are committed to. If we disturb them as fast as we can foil their plans." The atmosphere started to become more serious by the second. Stros was just a small island, but it was filled with necromancers and undead. Foiling the worm cult plans is way easier said than done. A few hours passed after the slaughtered village event. Arania led the team right towards Saintsport. Saintsport is a small settlement located on the southern tip of Stros. It contains a port, a lighthouse, and the square of Lecky, a large shrine dedicated to Michaela Lecky. The town was named in honor of Lecky, saintess of the spirit sword. The town was fortified by the local militia after the events of the undead outbreak. Thanks to the port this village has, they managed to provide themselves with food and water from the mainland and even received a merchant from Cyrodiil. Currently, the village chief was the one leading the defense, but some days before the undead outbreak, a child came to the village with some monks saying that they are here to warn the village from imminent danger. After the outbreak, those monks gained some popularity, and even the village chief had to listen to them. The thing about those monks was a particular child leading them. She was an imperial girl 10 years of age with a bald head and a weird appearance. She had tattoos on every inch of her body. She wore bracelets and anklets of gold, as well as a light robe of yellow, brown, and red lehenga koli-like dress. That child lit up a brazier of flame, fed it with her magic, and kept dancing in front of the flame in a frenzied manner. She sang in incomprehensible words not from any language in the world, but from words she alone made up and understood. The more she dances, the more frenzied the monks around her dance, and the more they beat their drums and chant around the flame. The common people looking at them from afar didn't approach or act hostile towards them. Those crazy monks and child have saved the village many times in those 5 days. Every time the undead showed up, the local militia was ready, and that's because of the child. She would always predict any undead raid. The refugees that came to the town were always suspicious of her, and some even complained, but the locals were really overprotective of the child, that can be considered their lifeline now. At the end of the 5th day, that child started shouting and screaming again. She fell off and stood up in actions that defied physics and kept speaking. "The south. He comes from the south. He comes from the south. He is here. The south. Clear for him. Let him here. He comes. She comes. It is beginning." The child's voice felt as if the devil was possessing her throat and speaking through it. The village chief, who heard her, ran to the south with his militia, trying to understand what manner of he was the girl mentioning. He was not far away, walking in full armor with a very long sword resting on his shoulder and a cloak not moving with the wind. The dark knight that marched towards Saintsport appeared with a woman riding a mule, another with a long spear, and 2 tall girls with slim figures and fading presences. That group approached the town with another layer of gloom lurking above them, making every single member of the local militia perspire beads of cold sweat. Those people were by no means ordinary. Beings like those are probably monsters who just walked out of a battlefield. The survival instincts of those militia members told them not to move, not to act, not to react. Jon walked in by lifting the barricade around the village entrance with telekinesis and walking past, simply. Well met, Redguard. I trust the dead won't give the living much trouble now that we cleared the area around. Rest well for the night. The man in ebony said that he took care of the undead that were terrorizing Saintsport just like that. On any day, this man would be considered the hero of the village, and they would throw him a celebration near the shrine of the Saintess, but the mood wasn't right for any sort of celebration. Thank you, sir. The village chief thanked him, but the man didn't ask for a reward and headed inside. In the village square, there were refugees and some locals minding their own business when all stopped to see what manner of strangers walked in the village. In times like these, people must be warier of other people more than monsters and threats. Thieves and marauders thrive in times of need, and the true mettle of men shows its color during hardships. Thankfully, the band of warriors didn't seem like a group of evildoers. Jon felt the unrest in the villagers' eyes, but his aura was hard to suppress, especially after killing those necromancers. He had to calm down his mood first, but the gloomy weather only made his mood murkier. It was then when he spotted the child covered in tattoos and dancing in front of the flame. The way the girl moved seemed comical and lifted his spirit a lot. I know that dance, Jon said. What is it? Mirren asked. In Skyrim, the druids would do some divination rituals like that to predict harvest and rain. Druidism is one thing, but here in Hammerfell, they have a dance called Zar. You are not much into divination. Yes, it is the only archetype in mysticism I couldn't even comprehend, however, my wife is skilled in it. She would do rituals like these all the time. Jon had a good memory of Alina, who would always visit Kynesgrove for these kinds of things. Meanwhile, the girl dancing around the brazier stopped what she was doing as she felt Jon's presence. You have arrived? The girl turned around and looked at Jon with a bright face. She jumped off the platform she was dancing on and ran towards Jon. Once she arrived, she threw herself hugging him as if he was someone she missed for a long time. Jon was confused by the girl who barely reached his waist. I missed you so much, she said. I haven't been able to look at you for the past 7 days. They always tell me danger is coming and I need to protect this place. I wouldn't have done it if I didn't know you were coming. Jon blinked a few times. For a moment there, Jon was totally clueless about his situation. He looked around him to see Mirren and Miranda as clueless as he is. Arania was acting naturally, but there's someone who didn't. Isha was shocked as if she has seen a ghost. She grasped her spear and retreated carefully. Jon, get away from her. Hurry! She even shouted. To see someone as hardy as Isha feel this threatened, Jon put his trust in his companion and blinked away from his place by 10 meters, leaving the girl to hug air. Mirren and Miranda did the same and took distance. Only Arania let out a heavy long sigh, predicting the confusion that will happen next, but she didn't even bother to stop it. Meanwhile, Isha's frustration seemed clear. You. Who the fuck are you? Isha asked, letting out a heavy domineering wave of aura. The abnormality seemed clear when the girl withstood Isha's aura like the breeze. She was by no means ordinary. At first, she was confused, but then she smiled at Isha and the others. Other than them, the whole village froze in terror. The little bald tattooed imperial girl had a composed air around her. Her tan imperial skin and her colorful hazel eyes showed wisdom beyond her age. Once she spoke, no one managed to keep a composed head like her. What is it, silly? Do you want to kill me once again? Kill her once again. The words made even Jon think and rethink the situation. However, seeing the shocked look on Isha's eyes, he couldn't help but believe what the girl said. The whole situation of Isha's labors was because she killed a child from Boethiah's cult who was important to Boethiah. Now, this child admitted being the one Isha killed. Reviving the dead should be something easy for a Daedra like Boethiah, but there was clearly more to it. Ha ha ha! The girl laughed in a victorious tone, as if her mischief has worked. What are you? Jon spoke in an indifferent attitude. The girl turned to him with a natural smile. I apologize. Since I know a lot about everyone I meet in advance before I meet them, I tend to act familiar around them. Let me introduce myself. She said, then walked closer to Jon. My name is Boethiah. PayPal for gift. PayPal. Me/Eldokmezi. Discord. GG/GKCKVA7S. Chapter 468, The Truth Behind Everything. A double chapter. Is available on P4Tray0N. Thanks to @Jack for joining on P4Tray0N, different from @Jack. Also, this chapter is a big revealing chapters. Don't hold back your paragraph comments. Part 1. My name is Boethiah. A girl so petite and childish declaring with a voice of a kid that she is the Daedric prince of deceit, conspiracy, secret plots of murder, assassination, treason, and unlawful overthrow of authority. Despite the frightening atmosphere she had, Jon found her declaration adorable. You are not Boethiah, he said. The girl tensed up and looked at him with eyes on the verge of tears. And no, I am Boethiah, she said. You are not, he replied. I am, she insisted, stomping the ground hard. No, Jon said after taking a closer look. I sob, but that's me. The girl looked at him and started crying. How the situation reached this point was incomprehensible to most of the people witnessing it, but Jon removed his mask and showed a wide smile in front of the crying girl. The people around started looking at him with judging eyes, but he didn't even bother. Brat, those puppy eyes will never ever work on me, he said, taking pride in his immunity to the puppy eyes heresy. What, damn it, I forgot about that. All of a sudden, the girl dropped her act. Jon didn't retreat his widening smile, for he had the cat faith that protected him, but the others were so taken aback, not believing that a child would use such a technique to trick adults without them finding out. It can't be every single time someone uses the puppy eyes, it turns out to be a lie. Mirren himself admitted falling for it. That's why you should drink in puppy tears mug as well as feminist tears mug. Jon held up his two favorite mugs, each in a hand, showing them around and making himself glow with magic. Perfectly balanced, as all things should be. I am getting a merch vibe here. His inspiring appearance gave birth to a new faith in this desolate part of the world, but that's a story we are avoiding. Clap, 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 clap. The young girl started clapping while completely enthralled by Jon's teachings. Amazing! I've seen you give those lessons multiple times, but seeing it in reality is not like the visions. I now understand, she said. Ha ha, good kid. Jon was wholeheartedly pleased, but he noticed Isha's glare towards him for diverting the subject. Okie, ahem. So, brat, who are you? She smiled calmly and introduced herself. I am Boethiah, she said. This again. Isha was not taking this answer well. Wait. Miranda seemed to have understood it. You are the prophetess of Boethiah, right? Yes, the girl nodded. And you were named after Boethiah, right? Indeed, the girl said with a cheeky smile. See? Miranda looked at Jon and the others. A strange silence took over for a while. Aha! And they all understood it a bit later. Stinking brat, you were playing a trick on me all that time? Jon didn't take it well. Tee-hee-hee. The girl acted all cheeky and cute. More importantly, are you really the one Isha killed? Mirren focused on the subject. The girl stopped her foolish act and nodded with a natural face. She then showed a part of her abdomen with a scar on it. It was almost 3 years ago. That woman carrying a spear entered our cave in a frenzy and started killing. By Boethiah, I have never seen such a beautiful sight in my life. She said the last part with the temperament of a bloodthirsty maniac rather than a child of her age. "And how in the blazes did you come back?" Isha asked. "Lord Boethiah sent me back. A Daedric prince can revive his followers as long as they claim their souls. The situation wasn't easy, you know, since everyone I knew was killed, but it was all worth it when I managed to take a glimpse of him," Boethiah said, pointing at Jon. "A glimpse at me?" Jon asked. "Yes. You see, death is not an end but rather an elevating experience. You go to places and see things not bound by physical realms or world laws. Some find their way to the afterlife where things make more sense, others drift in an agony of their making when their souls know how corrupt they are. On the other hand, children like me get a whole different experience. We drift in the river of souls entwined with the river time. Past, present, and future, we see things and relive moments, sometimes we take different shapes and experience other lives. All this and that was part of the experience of death, well, until Lord Boethiah claimed my soul and returned me back. I may look like 10 years old, I may have been revived only a few hours after my death, but those few hours were years in different realities. I think someone here can relate to what I just said." Her words were not that of a 10-years-old child, as she revealed wisdom, not that of worldly knowledge. Things untold and visions beyond the world. She is 10 years of age, but she can't count her real age, if she included the time after her death and revival, as it was an out-of-time experience. She even looked at Jon, claiming he can relate to her experience, but he kept a tight mouth and didn't say a word. Those things she said were about losing the I and experiencing the all. Becoming one with everything through molding one's mind into the consciousness of the aka, the time. A selflessness of existence to surf within the dream. The heavy mood caused by her words was shaken once Jon decided it was over. "So that's it. Little Boethiah over here is someone who knows things, right? You came back from the unknown or whatever that mumbo-jumbo was," Jon said. "Call it whatever you like," she said. "So, I hope you forgive Isha for killing you once." "No." The girl stopped Jon. "I must thank her." "Okay, that's not how she feels about killing a child." Jon sighed. "Anyway, why were you named Boethiah?" "When I was a newborn, my parents were the heads of the cult, and as their child, I was offered to Boethiah and blessed at infancy. My parents and our local cult prayed for Boethiah through me to the point where they forgot to give me a name and kept being prayed to instead. By time, I only responded to the name Boethiah as my own, and so, I became Boethiah." Jon didn't know how to respond to that. He only smiled wryly and gave a nod. "Thankfully, the meeting passed smoother than I thought," Arania said as she approached Boethiah. "Arania, long time no see. You look skinny," Boethiah said. "Ugh." Arania rolled her eyes as Boethiah copied Jon's attitude from earlier this morning. "Lady Azura's champion and laborer will be relying on your help, Priestess Boethiah. I hope you act for the best of our cause," Arania said. "Azura's laborer is Boethiah's champion. I know what I'm doing here," Boethiah said. "Then please, by all means. Our laborer, Priestess Arania, the standing of a champion is higher than the standing of a laborer. Please address the champion accordingly." "Humph. His vice is not fully redeemed, so until then, he is our laborer. I see. Wait. If I remember correctly, Azura's star was taken back by Azura. Shouldn't the holder of the star be the champion? That got me thinking. He holds the ebony mail. So he is Boethiah's champion. Does this mean he is no longer Azura's champion? Blasphemous brat. Sagihag. And the two priestesses started fighting over Jon. Daedric cults may ally with one another, but they are still different cults in the end of the day. Azura's cult is more of a natural and acceptable religion, as their practices don't go further than praying to the magic of dusk and dawn, dressing fancy, and acting like peacock. On the other hand, Boethiah's cult is a bunch of assassins, mercenaries, politicians and all manner of people who take conspiracies and lies as means to ends. The interests of the two cults may not cross one another, but they still look down on anyone other than themselves. Let's just get down to business, shall we? Jon spoke. What is the situation? Boethiah and Irenaeus ceased their clash as Jon spoke. It was Boethiah's turn to clarify things. Undead, worm cult, soul snare. What exactly do you want to know? She said. Jon looked at Isha and nodded to her. She was in a bad mood after discovering that her labor was because she killed a girl who can be revived, but she let out a long sigh. The past is the past now, nothing can be done about it. She looked at Boethiah and found it hard to speak to her, but she spoke anyway. Tell me about Zane, she said. Boethiah made an understanding face and pointed Isha to the fire brazier she was dancing around just now. It is a depressing story, but you already know that, she said and threw something in the fire, making it burn more. I have been on divination for some time, but as soon as we got an identity on the unknown laborer, I managed to understand a lot. Let me show you, Boethiah said, and the fire started to dance. Part 2. Zane hated lycanthropy more than anything. Many creatures of the night met their demise to the pointy end of his spear. His fame as a battle-lord outshined his peers and other generations of battle-lords, guaranteeing him the position of the next war chief of the citadel of Ebonarm, but some were envious. Those envious peers of his decided to lure him out to the heart of Alakar by telling him that Isha went on a dangerous hunt alone. Once he reached her, he found her captured in the middle of an old ruins. There, he was bound and cursed by what he hates the most, lycanthropy. Here is where the story they knew ends and a different story begins. The magic Zane was cursed with is called hate. Something that draws the thing one hates the most from the deepest parts of the void, the domain of Siddhis. Whatever is taken from the void gets merged to the cursed, making them inseparable. That day Zane turned into a werewolf, went on a rampage, and killed the ones who kidnapped Isha and cursed him. But one survived. That was the mastermind behind Zane's curse. Her name is Delilah. Delilah is a battle-lord from the citadel, known to be a very beautiful woman, but appearances can be deceiving. She was a sleeper worm, an agent of the worm cult that gets planted in certain organizations from a young age to grow in ranks and provide intel and recruits to the worm cult. This Delilah was there when Jon entered the tournament he sponsored to become the grand champion of the Imperial Arena. After she saw Jon there, she contacted Grand Champion Darius, by that time, and offered him a reward for the body of Jon Dare. The worm cult was into such business to provide their undead horde with the best corpses they can command. Darius was a supplier of strong fighters and has dealt with the cult for years without knowing. Back to Zane's story. When Delilah cursed Zane, she was at a safe distance from the curse, manipulating the whole process. The important thing is that her actions had a reason and a purpose. The reason why Zane was cursed was because of his great hatred towards werewolves, as he became one of them with the power of the void. His type of transformation was exceptional among all the children of the night, and his powers were grim. He can't be easily killed. He can regenerate like a troll, and even if his heart, spine, brain or anything was damaged, the curse would reform it once again. Zane was aware of that as he tried to take his own life away from his wife and sister, but to no avail. At those times, Delilah was watching her monster grow in both power and desperation. She wanted to give him even more power, but also erase every shred of humanity within him and create a body fit for her ultimate goal. She started to lure him towards very grim solutions for his curse. She used her agents to direct him as healers and mystics until he was led to the Daedric Prince of Wishes, Clavicus Vile. A prior arrangement was sealed with Clavicus Vile, so when he heard Zane's wish, he offered him something. What if you become a vampire? You can't be a werewolf if you are a vampire. That's what Vile suggested. It was common knowledge for a battlelord such as Zane, and he even tried it, but no vampire was strong enough to transform him. The only solution was a flask of blood retrieved from an ancient vampire from Skyrim, the blood of the ancient. Its cost was 7 tasks Zane must do for Clavicus Vile called the Labors. Zane accepted. He took the ancient vampire's blood and drank from it. Did it work? No, it killed Zane. He was escorted back to his house dying and pale to the point of blue. This was the memory that Isha remembered vividly. The day her brother died. And it was as she believed. The real Zane died that day. What she doesn't remember was the time since she met Vile's dog, Barbas, that hypnotized her and messed with her memories. She then went on the quest that led her to labor for 2 years, retrieved the Spear of Bitter Mercy, and killed the priestess of Boethiah. At that time, Delilah has recovered Zane, or rather what is left of him, the body affected by both lycanthropy and vampirism. A hybrid. Delilah has managed to create a freak out of Zane's body that carried a living soul of a werbeast and the death aptitude of a vampire. Something with horrific powers, invulnerability, focus and intelligence. That body's purpose was to be a vessel for Mannimarco's reincarnation. It has risen from its grave so powerful and strong that no matter what, nothing can kill it. But as expected of Clavicus Vile, most of his deals have something written in secret ink. The deal between Clavicus Vile and Mannimarco was to provide Mannimarco a suitable body to send a reincarnation of himself in, every few years. It happened with the hero of Cratch when he faced a necromancer called Mannimarco, while the real one was already a chim long ago. It was the same case this time too, but Clavicus Vile had a claim on Zane. Zane's end of the bargain, which was not yet fulfilled, was to labor, else Mannimarco can never send a reincarnation of himself in the body. To solve that, Clavicus Vile has let back remnants of Zane's to act as the puppet strings. Zane's brutality as a warrior, his skills, his powers, all under the full control of Clavicus Vile. As everyone thought he was dead and Isha was trapped in a plot to labor for 2 years, Clavicus Vile had all the fun time he wanted to play with the hybrid he created, Zane. Clavicus Vile had a list of artifacts he sought after but also respected Mannimarco's wishes to gather his most 3 prized artifacts: the Bloodworm Helm, the Staff of Worms and the Necromancer's Amulet. Other than that, Zane's first labor was to retrieve a King Orgnum's coffer to Clavicus Vile, a coffer that can create gold from not every day, making its owners able to put the wealthiest of merchants to shame. The second labor was to retrieve the last remaining Dragon Horn, one of the legendary artifacts created primarily by the Dragon Guard and used as weapons against the dragons. The third labor was to retrieve an Elder Scroll known as the Elder Scroll of the Forgotten. It contains information that is very crucial to the Empire to the point where they will kill for. The fourth labor was to retrieve the Deadland Hammer, a hammer associated with Maroon's Dragon's realm and capable of creating iron Atronac. The fifth labor was to retrieve the Flask of Lilandril. It is a magical flask that absorbs and reflects the magic of all kinds. The sixth labor was the Bloodworm Helm, the Staff of Worms, and the Necromancer's Amulet. Until now, Zane has gathered 2 of the 3 but was interrupted by Jon and his team. Every plan Clavicus Vile and Mannimarco came up with was in jeopardy now as Azura, Boethiah, Mephala and Sheogorath started showing movements. It was wise to retreat to Hammerfell, harness the battlefield to their preferences and wait for the last labor of the opposite faction to come. The soul snare was active and Hammerfell was thrown into chaos. What waits is Zane, Delilah, the Worm Cult, a horde of undead, Mannimarco and finally Clavicus Vile. The dancing fire ceased its visions. Despite being around the fire, the weather dropped a few degrees around those who just watched what Boethiah just shown. To sum it up, Zane's hate was used against him, turned into the first ever werewolf-vampire hybrid, and was controlled by Clavicus Vile to retrieve things for him until Metamarco can send his reincarnation into Zane. And that's how things happened. The mystery that made us go in circles all that time is no longer a mystery. Boethiah said and looked at the ones surrounding her. All is revealed. Mirren was horrified, Miranda was covering her gaping mouth in shock, Jon felt like a mountain collapsing on his head. But there was Isha. Isha has taken too much and suffered the most. First, it was her brother getting taken from her, then she was sent in labors for 2 years going through whatever horrors she went through, then she returned to find her brother is dead, suffered a mental shock, found her brother still alive and tried to kill her, and now that. She endured like a camel, but the straw that broke her back was actually falling thunder. She collapsed on her knees crying and wailing. It was finally there. The emotion. The reaction. The scream of salvation. She knew in her heart that it was the truth. She was set free from all the lies and secrets. For the first time in 2 years and 9 months, she was crying as she should have all along. Not frozen in denial. Not raging in anger. Not gratified in disbelief. Not silent in depression. But free in acceptance. Her brother who heard her first words, who supported her first steps, who put in her hand the first spear, who healed her first training wound, who took from himself and put in her plate. He was in a great deal of injustice. He was used like a tool and deprived of everything. Now that is all clear, all the hatred found a target, all the pain found the purpose, all the blood found a vengeance. She cut her hands letting her blood flow in the fire, and she swore revenge by blood and fire. She would purge those who did that to her brother from the face of Nirn. Then she passed out from exhaustion. When she woke up, she saw the sky gloomy red as she was sleeping on the sand. She looked to the side to see the others all there sitting and eating to retrieve their stamina for the coming grand battles. I've sent out Wrath, Jax and Nefertiti with 300 Wrathmen, Bonemen and Mistmen. Violent clashes are occurring everywhere, but we have prisoners. Jon spoke to the young Boethiah while showing her a small light screen that viewed an image to Stros from above. Wow. Seeing you in action is a whole different thing than divination. Please, teach me. Little Boethiah played around Jon like a child, nothing compared to how she acted some time ago. The village is a safe place for operating in Stros. We still need to contact Port Hunding to gather the forces of the island behind us, Mirren suggested. Great idea. Seeing her friend, seeing her family already in action, she couldn't help but join in. Why is the sky this red? She asked. That's how the night looks like under the effect of the soul snare matrix. Jon replied as he walked towards her. At day it is gloomy gray and at night it is gloomy red. He walked to her offering a hand. How ominous, she said as she was left up in one fast pull. Feeling better now? Jon asked. She nodded. Mirren came closer to her and pushed Jon away. Love, it's okay at the moment, you can rest if you want, he said. She smiled at him, feeling the warmth of his words. I am starving. Let's eat together, she said. Losing a family member makes some cherish the rest of the family they have. Isha was that kind of person. She joined in and laughed at the little Boethiah as she kept stuck to Jon, watching what he was doing with the light screen in full interest. Hey midget, what's with you and Jon? She spoke. Hearing her, little Boethiah put back her haughty face. I am the prophetess, he is the champion. We should exchange guidance from time to time, finally that I personally met him, rather than just doing divinations all day. Boethiah said. You scry about Jon all day? Isha put a weird face. Indeed. I have seen him doing many amazing stuff. Punching people with thunder, riding firebirds, jumping from the sky and a lot more. Little Boethiah was excited, talking about everything she knew about Jon from her divinations. Jon gave a helpless smile, not knowing how to deal with such a kid. So you're watching everything, huh? Isha thought, but I think that in Jon's life, some parts a child shouldn't watch, you know. What parts? Boethiah tilted her head. Isha smiled slyly and looked at Jon. Don't worry, sister. I have a wife who can do divinations too. I learned a trick that involves greed to keep me off their grid. Jon made a thumbs up. Isha and Miran laughed hard to that. What is it? I don't understand. Little Boethiah kept nagging Jon to tell her. As he kept a tight lip, she turned to Isha with a pouting face. You are just jealous I know so much about him, she said. Isha smiled at the brat and replied. Why would I be? I have my honeyboo right here. Bulky guys like Jon are not my type, she said while pulling Miran closer. The one who should be jealous is Miranda, by the way. As she pointed at Miranda, everyone looked at the alt-mare blonde who was abnormally silent even for the silent her. Mira. Nern to Miranda, over. Jon called. She seemed to have recovered from some overthinking. Everything is all right up there, astronaut? He asked. What? She replied, not following up with anything. The rest couldn't help but laugh at her. Hey, what's wrong? Isha asked. Miranda seemed uncomfortable and hesitant, but eventually she spoke. Something doesn't add up in the story we just heard, she said. The air tensed all of a sudden. Miran gave her a meaningful look that hints, not now. What is it? Isha asked. What doesn't add up? Miranda felt some guilt bringing up that matter. Before she passes away, Isha was in a sorry state of overflowing emotions, but she turned very bright when she just woke up. It is best not to say anything, but it felt important. What I don't feel good about is that woman called Delilah. She went to such lengths making a curse and organizing everything, but what I don't understand is how Isha's labors are related to that, she said. Now that she said that, it made sense. She could just trick Isha like everyone in the Citadel, right? Why send her on a fool's errand when she was just a devastated sister, nothing more? Miranda's question took things from a whole different perspective. Not what happened, but why it happened. There was only one person to answer that. Little Boethiah, who was clinging to Jon. She felt the gazes on her, so she sat down beside Jon. I was going to get to that later, but looks like I can't avoid now. Fine, she said. The others listened carefully as she raised 3 fingers. You have only asked one question while you should have asked 3. These are, why Isha? Why kill me? And why the spear of bitter mercy? To answer that, I must mention that the woman called Delilah has managed to kill 3 birds with 1 stone. First, Isha had to be disposed of. Kidnapping or killing her were available options, but necromancers know very well how tricky can souls be, especially the ones with a blood bond like Isha and her brother. Isha's soul might have reacted and emerged as a ghost to warn the people if she was killed, or her brother's soul would have reacted violently if she was in distress. The labors were perfect tool to just make her walk away. Second, the reason why I was killed was not just to force Isha into labors but to prevent me from seeing something. As you know, I am powerful when it comes to divinations, maybe the best out there, only second to the red-eyed Queen of Winterhold. However, that period I died in is a blind period to me. Until a certain time, that vision was blocked from me. That was the very period they took Zane out of the grave and sat him out. That's why Delilah had me killed on Isha's hand. Lastly, and the most important thing, is that spear, the spear of bitter mercy. A powerful Daedric weapon of Herson that no one can get rid of or seal. It was the best action to send that weapon away with Isha. After all, it is the only weapon out there that can threaten him. The only weapon that can kill Zane. PayPal for gift. PayPal. me/Eldokmizi. Discord GG/GKCKVA7S. Chapter 469, The Siege of Stros Mkai, 1, on P4TRE0N. Big thanks and welcome to our new patron at Tamarin. Away from Saintsport village, a band of necromancers made camp outside the dwarven ruins of Bzark. The ruins have a wide brass wall that separated the southwestern part of the island from the southeastern part where Saintsport is. That band of necromancers was in the middle of an argument after the late accidents that kept happening this day. All the units spread around the southeast of Stros went off the grid and the village of Saintsport seemed to not have fallen yet. By the Worm King, don't tell me all those fools decided to party and drink all in the same day. A worm warlock spoke as he was trying to see anything from the top of the brass wall. Don't bother. The best thing these lowlives can do is to die and feed the soul snare. A worm knight dismissed the other's worries. We still can't eliminate the possibility of any movements from the governor of Port Hunding, a worm agent suggested. The governor? No, our man on the inside has the governor handled. The Hunding Chargers won't cross the bay and keep defending the north where the governor reside. The Worm Knight dismissed it. I don't want to be pessimistic, but something doesn't feel right. The Worm Agent couldn't help but keep staring at the Badlands to the east. Strozmkai is a vast island with a big population. The native Redguards herd their cattle all around the island, and so many villages were raided by the worm cult for the sake of harvesting souls. Still, the big cities are the cult's target, for there are millions of lives to harvest in there, and around all Hammerfell, no major city has fallen yet. Whoever brings down the first city will gain a lot of praise from the leaders of the cult, as well as many benefits and rewards. Should Port Hunding fall to the plan the cult leaders in Strozmkai planning on, things would go nicely for this branch of the cult. Stomp, stomp, stomp. Suddenly on the brass wall, footsteps were heard coming loud and clear. The three cult officers turned around to see another one of them walking to the gathering spot. "Hail, comrades," he spoke. "Denning, come join us." The Worm Knight stood up greeting his friend. Denning walked closer to the three, showing a friendly attitude. "How was your mission? Did you finally bring down Saintsport?" the knight asked. "Easy. We are now chasing the locals, and by tomorrow, they will fight for the dead," Denning said. "And why didn't you contact us?" the worm agent asked with doubt in his eyes. "You know how cornered dogs fight. They gave me some unnecessary trouble," Denning said as he picked a liquor bottle that was between the other three. "Wasn't the saying about cornered cat?" the Worm Knight asked. "Idiot, have you ever seen a cat get cornered?" Denning replied in threatening tone. The others laughed at the prank Denning just came up with. "So, the plans will finally be successful at this rate. Cheers," the Warlock said. "Tell me about those plans," Denning asked as he patted the Warlock's shoulder. "We made plans to attack Port Hunding as the three elders commanded. First, we distract the governor's men by our activities in the north until we take down Saintsport and the ships in it. Once that is done, we will have access to the ships in Saintsport and make a covert trip through the Hunding Bay, then go wild once we reach the city port. Our spies keep the defenses light." The Warlock spoke in detail. That's a nice plan," Denning said. The Worm Knight and the Worm Agent looked at each other, feeling strange about the Worm Warlock talking this much about the plans. Denning is one of them after all, so he shouldn't be asking. The Worm Warlock also felt a bit strange for speaking this much, as if his tongue was sat loose. "Feels nice, isn't it?" Denning asked. "Talking your heart out." Yes, ha. Ha ha ha. Denning and the Warlock laughed, then turned to the Knight and the Agent. "You two, set and drink." Ha. Denning was friendlier than ever and invited the two as he simply poked them with his hand. The two loosened up and laughed too. "Ha ha. Yes, let's drink." "Ha ha. All right." The Knight, the Agent, and the Warlock felt all their tension go away as soon as they sat down to dreen. Their heads rolled down onto the floor. Denning was looking at them as he wielded a jet black sword. "Well done. You have become better at this," Bring me more. More souls to nourish the blade. More souls to win my favor. Alright, I'll kill more. Denning transformed into his true identity, which is Jon. The real Denning was, of course, very dead, and Jon made sure to trap his soul into a black soul gem just in case. He did his favorite game of going in hostile places with a familiar face, then murder all the persons of interest in that place. It would surely nourish the ebony blade, and make Mephala pleased. The ebony blade, Daedric. Awakening 8 out of 10. Absorb vitality. Fortify swordsmanship. Then awakening finally went up a rank. Jon checked the blade's edge and couldn't help but let out a laugh. Damn, this thing is insane, he said. Maybe the ebony blade wasn't his favorite weapon in the game, but in reality, this artifact is broken. Jon could feel how dangerous the blade has become now that has reached this point. It is indestructible, extremely sharp, and no one can use it like him. The blade has a will to its own and causes its users to go insane if they have weaker wills. Jon's tyrannical aura helped him to dominate the blade, not the other way around. Right now, if a normal person took the handle of this blade, their minds will be possessed by bloodlust and go on a killing spree. Also, the absorb vitality enchantment was superior now. The awakening reached past the 8/10 threshold. A cut from the blade won't be healed that easily and will cause a bleeding effect if it hits a blood vessel. The fortify swordsmanship enchantment was now on a new realm. This enchantment was the important one in Jon's eye. He would train with the sword every day for at least 2 hours to sync up with the blade's skill, then go for another 2 hours on a training sword to keep up with the skill. Actually, the best way to control the ebony blade, without being controlled by it, is keeping up with its skill or being superior. In truth, Jon's own skill without the ebony blade is very close to the skill with the blade. 8 paces from 10 to perfection. Jon is talented in whatever he does, but he is a talent who works hard. His insane swordsmanship and his perfect sword will prove to be of important use during the end of the labor, but the only one who could see that was little Boethiah, who was standing not too far away from the brass wall. Jon walked to the edge and gave a telepathic signal for the others to come. Mirren and Miranda showed up out of nowhere. Isha walked to the brass wall from a place where some sentries started falling dead. Boethiah was lifted up by Jax as he conjured bound flame wings and flew to the wall. Nefertiti came from the shadows and appeared on Jon's shoulder. We should give this cool group a name, Jon thought. Totally, Mirren agreed. Right now, we have an undead horde to take care of. Isha pointed to the other side of the wall. With another horde? Miranda looked back to the direction they came from. The Bone Colossus samurai, Wrath, marched forward followed by all manners of undead. He went on a rampage for the whole day, conquering the worm cells scattered around Saintsport and made an army of 500 undead for his master. He walked with a bone katana in hand while eating a big skull he came across. Lately, Wrath was developing a habit of eating bones and making weapons out of bone, rather than using the ones Jon provided. This new way meant that he is evolving once again. The brass wall had 2 gates locked by the necromancers, so Jon had them open as soon as his army arrived. Beyond them, the worm cult had made an army of the dead and a camp for their ranks. They didn't know what was coming as Mirren, Miranda and Isha took care of all the sentries. Kill. Jon gave the order and Wrath reacted. Howl. As a brass gate was opening, their howl of wrath hurled towards it, pushing the 2 doors aside and crashing into the undead horde behind it. By the next second, Wrath and his legion were swarming in a wave of chaos. Master, should I join in? Jax asked. No. Jon refused. Go to Port Hunding City. If you find anything happening there, report to me. Yes. Jax spread the bound flame wings and took the sky. Wow. Jax became so strong ever since he became your apprentice. Boethiah held to Jon's arm and started jumping. Annoying. Nefertiti looked at her from above Jon's shoulder, then looked away. Okay, don't start a fuss right now. Jon shook off Boethiah and turned to his team. You go ahead, bring whatever you can find. I'll stay here with the brat and manage the fight. The three nodded and jumped into the fray, seeking out the necromancers at the end of the enemy camp. Jon took out his light screen and turned on the Eagle Vision mode to monitor his troops, then started giving out commands. Miranda, a worm sending a distress signal, 76 meters, 2 o'clock. Target down. Isha, there is some big-ass flesh Atronak, 195 meters, 7 o'clock. Vonnet. Wrath, you are running low on numbers. Convert some fresh undead. Mayas. Noisy bastard. Pride, conjure reinforcements. And that's how he started fighting. For some reason, his old gaming ghost managed to make a strategy game out of this situation. Before dawn, the whole force of the worm cult to the south of Stros was annihilated. Now teach me. Please. But little Boethiah was still excited, begging to learn from Jon. On the other side of the island, Jax arrived on the western wall of the city of Port Hunding. The western battlement of the city was crowded with defenders, as they seemed to have just gotten rid of an undead raid. Jax used his flame-bound wings to glide over the city, and arrived near a tower where he hid himself from view because his wings were really visible. Also, no one will stay still after watching a flying cow with fire wings around. Speaking of the wings, it was something that he always fancied, as it seemed that Morehouse Brethofkine, father of all minotaurs, was a man-bull with wings in the culture of minotaurs. Of course, this spell was created by consulting Jon, who is Jax's mentor. Jon mixed up some of the spells Jonrad used and taught them to Jax, who was an enthusiastic pyromancer. This bound flame wings was a variation of many archetypes, but after testing, Jon decided it is best to make a spell that adds power to the normal levitation spell, which was bound wings, and tweaked it with a flame effect, creating bound flame wings. Jax took pride in this spell that he created with the help of his mentor and devoted himself to the path of combat and pyromancy. Back to the present, Jax kept watching the situation in Port Hunding from afar. A young man stood on the wall, blowing in his palms and rubbing them from the cold weather. "My lord, the scouts have returned. The undead are an hour away from the wall." An officer came running for the young man. "Good job, are the pitch traps ready?" the young man asked his officer. "Yes, my lord." "And the mages?" "They are running low on magicka, but the alchemists are providing them with potions." "Then we just need to endure it," the young man said, and returned to the watch. He was the governor of Port Hunding, Lord Kareem. 19 years of age, the young lord was the only reason why Port Hunding stood strong till now. He led the men, organized the refugees, and spread his fleet to resupply from the mainland and the empire. He was a fair and popular governor, but he had a hard time dealing with the inside. What worried him now was the undercurrents in Port Hunding more than the undead. And here it comes. "Lord Kareem, you are still up on the battlements? How praiseworthy! The late lord must be proud of you in far shores." A voice came from the back as a fleshy man walked up to him. This walking mound of fat was his vizier, Zayed. Unlike Kareem, who is from the Crowns, Zayed is from the Forebears. The two factions were always at odds ever since the founding of Hammerfell, but the situation in Stros was different. Both the Forebears and the Crowns shared the power in this historical city, with the Crowns as governors and the Forebears as ministers. Kareem looked at Zayed, doubting his appearance on the battlement to be of any good. Zayed is corrupt and known to be filthy rich, while Kareem was a warrior with a proud heritage and a noble bloodline that goes back to Izara, sister of Cyrus, hero of Stros. "What is it, Lord Zayed?" Kareem asked. My lord, I think you are really taking this matter seriously. Monopolizing the food of the granaries and the organized distribution is harming merchants like me. If you want to help the city, you just need to kick these refugees out, Zayed said. Are you seriously asking me to abandon my people, Zayed? Kareem turned angry and dropped the honorifics all of a sudden. Zayed was displeased by the sharp reply, but he still had to act his rule. Then, my lord, you need to face them with the hunting chargers, the vizier said as an innocent suggestion. Not the chargers. Kareem made a firm refusal. The hunting chargers are the cavalry force of Stros, best known for their unrivaled attack. These were the elites that the house of Kareem nurtured for years. Using them against the undead horde is suicide. Then, my lord, if there is no reason to assure the rich of Port Hunting to stay, I'm afraid every family has a ship they are willing to get on and leave. That includes the Hamad family. Kareem was about to hold his sword and kill that bastard, but he barely held it. Zayed has a lot of influence and knows how to bargain. He can manipulate the opinions of many families, and that includes the Hamad. To Kareem, the Hamads were his lover's family. He was not engaged yet, as he spent many years studying at the University of Sentinel and only returned when his father died. He met Fatin, daughter of the Hamad family, but he still didn't arrange the engagement. Somehow, Zayed was aware of this relationship. Give me a day to decide. Kareem could only say so and return to the watch. You don't have a day, my lord. Still, Zayed stopped him. What do you mean? Kareem asked with a bothered face. Nothing. I'll see you later, my lord. Zayed seemed to have magically changed his mind and turned around to leave. Kareem narrowed his eyes, not understanding what this fox was plotting. On the other hand, Zayed's face has twisted into a cruel grin as he reached the end of the stairs down the city walls. His servant came to him running and Zayed spoke quietly. That bastard has already run out of time. Notify the others, he said. Later by a minute, an ominous feeling struck the city. Looking far to the west, something monstrous appeared. A walking 7 meters of flesh and skin attached to each other. Its smell reached a mile, and its dread made Stros shake with every step it took. A gigantic flesh Atronak. PayPal for gift. PayPal. me/Eldokmizi. Discord. GG/GKCKVA7S. Chapter 470, The Siege of Stros 2, Beginning of the Mayhem. Sorry for being late, I was at the dentist yesterday, and my wisdom was all over the place. Also, big thanks to our new patron at Hiroukami. Note: last chapter, I described the gigantic flesh Atronak as 7 meters tall. Judging by my broken sense of measurement, I am fixing that to 15. A gigantic flesh Atronak. A walking tower of flesh reaching the height of 15 meters, a tad shorter than the city's walls, made of flesh on a manufactured skeletal frame, all of that sacked in a cover of human skin taken from multiple corpses and stitched up together. A pic in Discord's gallery. This combination of things formed a grotesque abomination, walking on two and marching towards Port Hunting with metal spikes growing from its back and a large metal pillar fuses in an arm with a wrecking ball-sized flail to the other. It had a face that carried the twisted features of hundreds of sacrificed innocents. Pain and suffering were what can be seen on it if someone can endure the dread that face causes. But no one could. The sight of that undead siege engine almost caused the defenders of Port Hunting to throw up their guts and shit their innards out. It was death incarnate. Even Lord Kareem commanding the defense couldn't help but freeze in front of that thing. He thought and thought of what is behind him and what is ahead of him. Behind him was a city to protect, and behind him was an enemy to repel. He looked to his left and saw scared men. He looked to his right and saw scared men. He looked behind him and saw men plotting against him. What kind of shit is that? Kareem took off his helm and threw it towards the coming undead, but it barely reached 30 meters from the wall. His young face appeared to all around him. His hair was black reaching his shoulder and his skin was dark as any Redguard, but his eyes reflected the will to survive. "What kind of shit is that? I asked you." He jumped atop the battlement, turning to his soldiers. They looked at him as if who is passing out from death, not knowing what to say. That thing over there is something none of us has ever been trained for. Something straight out of the stories of Cyrus and the dragon. That is not a thing man can hack with a blade, and that thing is coming for us, all of us. We have two choices: we either die shitting ourselves and begging for life, or we just die, taking that thing down with us, 'cause let me tell you, tonight we are dying. So we die the right way, we feast in far shores before the sun goes up, and make the whole damn Hammerfell envy us. Yeah, a few responded to the Lord's speech. I see your necks arching down as if you're scared that some blades go through them. Let me assure you it won't happen, because what is waiting for us is much worse. But we will fight, we will give those citizens running to the boats a chance so they can tell our story. Our souls won't be damned, for we are the warriors of Stros. Yeah. We don't fear, we don't falter. Yeah. We look at death, we know it's coming, but we will race for it to far shores. Yeah. Then let me hear drums. Light that bonfires. Tonight, Stros makes it stand. Redguards hail. Yeah. Hail! Lord Kareem inspired the soldiers like none other. Those who had lost all the will to fight were dragged back to shape. Kareem but took his sword and raised it up, looking at the abomination that was less than a few minutes away. Hearing the shouts of soldiers away from the walls, Zayed sneered in disdain. "Idiots!" he said. "Lord Zayed! Lord Zayed!" An old man in fancy clothing came running to Zayed. "Lord Hamad, what is it? We have gathered all that we can at the docks. Where is the young lord?" Hamad asked. "Oh, I don't know what to say." Lord Kareem decided to stay and fight. He won't retreat, Zayed said, putting a disheartened face. "What? No. You told me you will bring him. He, the young lord, must survive." "I am sorry, Lord Hamad, but we should get moving. Old men like us will get in the way once the fight starts." "Oh. Look, it is starting. Let's go, let's go." Zayed pulled away Hamad, and their guards directed them to the dock. As soon as they reached there, they started hearing the sounds of a battle on the wall. "Not good," Hamad said as he looked back to the wall. "My lord," one of his guards shouted to him. "It's Miss Fatten, my lord. She is refusing to evacuate." This girl." Hamad couldn't stand it and ran to the docks. Zayed looked indifferent as he followed silently. Once they reached near a certain ship, they could see a girl arguing with the guards. She was a good-looking Redguard girl wearing a decent dress and making a serious face. "Father, they wouldn't let me pass." "Fatten, what are you doing? Go back to the ship." Hamad came running to his daughter with a helpless appearance. "Father, where is Lord Kareem? I smell blood in the air." As the girl spoke, she showed a strong character different from her father. "I am sorry, daughter. I am so sorry. The young lord is staying." "You say what?" She turned scarier than she was before. "Daughter, As Hamad started to explain the situation to his scary daughter, Zayed was approached by a sweating, chubby young man. "Father, I did as you asked and loaded all the treasures from the warehouse. By the way, I found that sword." Zayed's son, Mansour, was ordered by his father to secure some family treasures in the cargo, and among them, he found an old sword that he suspected to be junk and came to inquire about it. But once Zayed saw the sword, his hair stood up from the scare. "You imbecile, hide that!" Zayed was about to shout, but to not cause a scene, he lowered his voice and pushed the sword in his son's mantle. "Don't walk with that around, you fool. Did anyone else see it?" Zayed asked. "And no. The boy stuttered. "Who saw it?" Zayed pulled his son's ear with anger. Lady Fatten saw it, but she didn't seem to recognize it," the boy said in pain. "Humph. You better be thankful she didn't." Father, what are we waiting for? Let's leave this island already," Mansour whined. "Stay quiet now." Zayed wasn't pleased with the current situation as the Hamad father and daughter were still arguing. "This girl, why is she giving us such trouble? Boy, didn't you say you are already in a good relationship with her?" Zayed asked his son. "I didn't, she is okay, but that governor. Once he came back from the mainland, she is all about him, father. What should I do?" "Tsk. Useless boy, don't worry. The city won't hold much longer. We are leaving right now." Zayed was convinced that the city won't hold as his contacts from the other side convinced him so. If he wanted to survive, he was to leave the city as soon as Saintsport village gets torched by the necromancers. The village is on the other side of the bay, and the necromancers are planning to take it, then use its boats to attack the city from the dock. His role was to keep the governor in check, cut assistance from the north to the south, and keep the docks lightly guarded. Also, if possible, he should plot the hunting chargers to go in a confrontation against the undead. This will guarantee the city's finest soldiers being out of the picture, and the morale of the defenders would drop rock bottom. He managed to do most of his role, but the governor was protective of his elite cavalry. Still, Zayed's job wasn't over, as he has some last business to take care of. The Hamad family are very rich merchants, even with the current family head being a weak character. His daughter is beautiful and smart, but on top of it all, she is the only heiress. If he could tie that girl to his son, he would gain a lot of riches, but unfortunately, she and the young governor were head over heels for each other. That girl was now delaying the departure for the governor that should be dead by now. "Lord Hamad, fatten my daughter. There is no point arguing. We must leave as soon." Zayed tried to finish the father and daughter argument, but Fatten glared at him. "Don't call me your daughter, Fatso. You two listen, you want to leave, take your ships and leave. I am staying." Fatten stormed away from her father, and as she was going towards the city, Mansour bumped into her. Sorry." The chubby boy retreated from her path, but she looked at him with strong eyes. Not particularly at him, but she felt the sword he was carrying. Snatch. In one move she took it and strode away. "Thanks for the sword, Nasser," she said, taking the regular sword she found on the regular young man she's acquainted with. It's Mansour." Mansour corrected her, but she was already exiting the pier. "No. Wait. The sword." Zayed freaked out. "What? The sword?" Mansour noticed he no longer had the sword. "Daughter. Wait." Fatten had already found herself a horse and rode to the direction of the wall with the relic sword in her hand. A few minutes ago, the western wall of Port Hunding was as active as a beehive. All the soldiers transferring barrels of burning substances to the catapults fixed on the wall, the engineers mounting the ballistas with spears, and the archers filling their barrels with fresh arrows. The young governor of Stros himself was carrying barrels with his soldiers and fortifying the gate. "It is getting closer," a watcher on the wall shouted, and the soldiers maximized their working speed. The young governor climbed the wall and saw the gigantic flesh Atronak getting closer and closer, with the smell of 1,000 corpses coming from it. The horrifying feeling gripped the heart of the young man as he thought of his reckless speech a few minutes ago. He lied to his men. He knew of the soul snare spell as his ancestor Izara recorded it in her journals. Whoever dies under the spell gets his soul trapped, and he just told his men they will meet after that day in far shores. Such a shame to end those men's lives with such a lie. He was ashamed, but he swallowed it. He looked behind him to the port where Fatten should be. At least she will be safe when he buys her time. Catapults ready. Ballistas ready. Mage squad ready. Archers ready. All his army squads were ready to commence the defense. Send them back to oblivion. And Kareem gave the order. Thousands of arrows, hundreds of flaming barrels, rocks and stones, spears and harpoons, spells of fire and light. A spectacle of shooting stars fell on the coming army of the dead without holding back a thing. Boom kaboom screech crash. A scene of absolute mayhem. Every spell and projectile sent at the deal exploded as the land was trapped with a burning pitch. Hell broke loose on the army of the dead. The defensive method gave a great shock to the necromancers and even shook the wall itself. The young governor kept watching how the fire spread in a split of a second, but a large cloud of nasty smoke blocked all the view to the west. No one saw anything or could tell what is happening amidst the smoke. Did we get them? A soldier asked. But the reply came grim. Growl. A frightening voice came from the other side of the smoke. The nasty smell of corpses followed. The certain part of the smoke dissipated, revealing the most hideous of all faces. The gigantic flesh Atronach. It was standing a few meters away from the wall. It was harmed and scratched due to the effect of the fire, but it remained standing, not bothering with any pain, as it is the child of agony. Its dreadful eyes met Kareem's, giving him the chill of his life. The latter froze until the flesh Atronach showed movement. The arm that was fused with metal was what caused the defenders to get scared, but the other arm carried another horrifying weapon. It was the arm dragging a chain and a flail with the size of a wrecking ball. Once the flesh Atronach moved that arm, the gigantic flail flew up and landed on top of the wall, landing on some soldiers. Those poor souls were killed as if some stone fell on an insect and made it squish from the pressure. Those soldiers that got squished were the beginning. The flesh Atronach pulled the chain horizontally, and the flail was dragged on top of the wall, grinding every soldier on its way. It was horrific. No matter what or who, that weapon didn't stop and kept dragging with Kareem at the end of its line. Death. It came so fast. Was he really ready? Kareem wanted to react, but he already realized there is no point. But in such an hour, a hero stepped in. It was not a man or a mare but a beast. A tall figure landed in the way of the flail. It took its distance, lowered its stance and pawed the ground with its hoof. The flail drew closer to it, but he took 2 steps towards first it and, clash! The beast hit it with its head and horns, carrying it from the wall and sending it away towards the face of the flesh Atronach. Boom crash! The flail was deflected by Jax's head attack and flew to the face of the flesh Atronach, pushing it to the back in one move. Silence. Utter silence came from the defender's side as a single minotaur redirected that giant thing with just its head. Another monster appeared. Master mentioned that the flesh Atronachs have resistance to magic and are very resilient. Jax spoke in self-monologue. He then noticed the others looking at him in fearful eyes. Excuse me, I will just mind my own business and keep the big thing in check. You take care of the other things, please. My master is on his way, hopefully he arrives late. The ones around him felt frozen from the polite tone it spoke in. You don't mind, right? He asked again. By all means, Kareem replied. Oh, thank you. Jax cast flame skin, flame cloak, bound flame wings, and lava whip. The arsonist Minotaur finally got his moment to shine. The next double chapter is available on Patreon. PayPal for gift. PayPal. me/eldokmizi. Discord. GG/GKCKVA7S. Chapter 471, The Siege of Stros Mkai, 3-4, Senseless Battle. Double chapter with a bit of extra took some time. Also, thanks for the astonishing new patrons. At Hugo Gurn, at Docnox, at Vlad the Mad Lad, at Atticus Chia. Next chapter is available on you know where, Patreon. Part 1. The soldiers of Port Hunding and their governor never expected any outside help during this national crisis. Every city-state in Hammerfell was under attack from the worm cult that came out from literally everywhere. But after the unusual appearance of Jax, even the xenophobic Crown's faction would welcome any help with open arms. Jax was as akin to a demon from Oblivion, a minotaur with dangerous-looking pair of horns and an aura of flame emitting from his large body. His bound flame wings were spread ready to ascend the sky and get to the towering flesh Atronach down the wall. Growl. Snarl. The flesh Atronach growled, making the whole air around it reek with death. Jax snarled, making the flame aura around him go up a notch. Howl. The flesh Atronach howled as it moved its large metallic arm towards Jax on the wall. Jax smirked and jumped in the air, spreading his wings. As soon as the slow arm was raised towards him, Jax cast a lava whip and swung it at the large metal arm grappling at it, then pulled himself towards it faster than he could fly. As soon as he reached the large metal arm that was about to descend and crush the wall behind him, Jax threw his master's favorite punch. Thunder Cookie. With a fist like Jax's, it completely pushed back the metal arm. Impossible! Both the necromancers manipulating the flesh Atronach and the young governor with his soldiers on the city wall were all stupefied. The flail from a second ago was something, but this metal arm was even thicker than the city wall. It was a scene straight out of a hero tale. On the other hand, Jax was not over. In one hand he had the lava whip, and in another, he had the thunder cookie. He threw the whip once again at the flesh Atronach while being midair and lashed it a few times. He grappled once again and descended on the Atronach's face with his hooves. The spot where Jax landed on exploded and the Atronach retreated back. And the battle went on. From the wall, Governor Kareem, who recovered from the shock, turned to his men with a bright face. Red Guards, I don't know who or what that is, but the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Support our savior. Archers, fire on the flanks. Mages, protect the front. Catapults, throw to the depth of the enemy's rank. Ballistas, target those necromancers in the back. Each necromancer you kill is 100 gold pieces. The higher the rank, the bigger the bonus. Kill. The governor howled to his men, and the morale on the city wall improved significantly. The part where many soldiers were killed by the flesh Atronach's attack just now was reinforced and put to use in a second. My lord! My lord! The gate is being attacked. A soldier came running. What? How? The necromancers are using their undead and making them explode on the wall. Those dirty fucker! Kareem was infuriated and ran from his post to check on the gate. It was indeed as the soldier said. The undead were swarming to the gate and the mages were defending it by lessening the number that gets closer. We need to lessen the burden, Kareem thought. He scanned the battlefield with his eyes, comparing the few numbers of soldiers to the large number of the undead. It was then when a devilish idea came to his mind. Commander Malek. He called for his second-in-command, the city captain. My lord, lead the defense, keep it like that and support this ally whatever it is, he said. What about you, my lord? Are you retreating? The captain asked. Oblivion take me before I do. I am taking the warband, Kareem said with maddened eyes, making his captain shiver, but he couldn't stop his lord. Stay safe, my lord. In every city-state there is a guard force and a warband. The defense and the offense. The warband of Stros was known across Hammerfell that despite being a band of islanders, they were one of the most dangerous forces on land even with their low number. Chargers! To me! Kareem shouted, summoning the warband from the defense wall. Redguard men and women with strong presences started to retreat towards him and gathered in a tight circle down the wall. He spoke and a bloodthirsty atmosphere formed around them. They headed out after that to the northern gate. Fatten took a sword and a horse, not knowing the identity of the sword that she paid no care about. As a daughter of a merchant, she lived a good life all her years, but she was a bit of a troublemaker. She loved horsemanship, swordsmanship, and marksmanship. The three arts Redguards excelled in. Despite the will of her father, she was trained by her mother, who was the daughter to the former captain of the hunting chargers. Thus that girl grew to be a good fighter. Hiya! She sped towards the western wall, where the defense was, and arrived at it in a few minutes after taking detours around the defenses prepared in the city in case the wall didn't hold. Once she arrived, she jumped off her horse, climbed the wall and looked for Kareem. "Lord Governor! Lord Governor!" she called, but he wasn't anywhere near his post. She then saw the one leading the defense to be the city guard captain. "Captain Malek," she called the man crossing her way among the coming and going soldiers. "Lady Fatten? What in oblivion are you doing here? Where is his lordship? He took the chargers to the north." Once he said so, she turned to the north with a pale face. "No! Going out to the battlefield like that is suicide, no matter how much she thinks about it." She ran from her place and reached down the wall to her horse, but it was no longer there. She had to run. She turned north and planned to run with the wall, but as soon as she crossed some distance, she arrived at the western gate where it was being fortified by the soldiers. More to that, there was a battalion of guards and local volunteers stationed there. "What is going on here? Why aren't those soldiers on the wall?" She spoke to the highest-ranked soldiers she saw. "What are you doing here, girl? Get to safety." The soldiers spoke to her rudely. "Sorry." She didn't bother and even apologized, knowing the distressful situation. "Where is his lordship?" "At the north." You have a sword. Join the defenders now. We are making a stand behind the chargers. Take a helm and a shield from there." The soldier took her by the arm, thinking that she is a local volunteer. Fatten found herself in front of a carriage distributing weapons, helms, and shields. Seeing her with a sword, no one bothered giving her another weapon, as most of the weapons here were all axes, clubs, and short spears. She was dragged with the tide of the crowd, and was stationed in a tight formation of soldiers in front of the gate. On the other side of the wall, Kareem was leading a band of cavalry on grey Yokudan charger horses, which gave the band its name as the Hunting Chargers. A while ago, Kareem gathered his men and suggested that as long as that ally was battling the gigantic flesh Atronak and the undead horde's charge was fully absorbed by the wall, this was the time to go through them with a nice clean charge. The horses of the band were trained to this kind of situation, thus their fame came from their lethal charge. Supported by the aura of their riders, as each rider was an aura master, this meant that a spectacular scene was going to happen. They got to the northern gate riding on their horses and exited the city from there, where no undead would stop their ride. Utilizing the north as a higher ground, the chargers would descend on the undead in one swoop, killing or getting killed. The right move would be directly facing the necromancers in the rear of the undead, but these fuckers were well defended by their dead minions, thus lessening the load on the wall was the top priority. The Hunting Chargers in the siege of Stros. Pick in Discord's gallery. Kareem's action will be recorded as daring in a time of great desperation, but that's years from now, and it wouldn't have succeeded if not for the unexpected elements that will show up in the latter half of the battle. In the meantime, all the thoughts in the head of the young governor were to blast through those undead. Despite not being a charger, he was at least capable of handling a charge. As the horses ran in the open land and turned south towards the enemy, the wind resistance made Kareem feel his body being strengthened and his heart being forged. "Charge at them!" What came from oblivion should be sent there, he called atop his voice. "Ha!" The chargers around him shouted to harden their hearts and release their auras. They lit the charge around them as they all trained the easiest, the most simple and the most destructive type of aura, the flame. In front of them, the scene of the undead trying to swarm the gate and the wall came closer and closer. They could see the undead being halted as the ones behind them never expected the chargers to appear in this time. And the development was to behold. Hundreds of horses running in a formation of maddened warriors cut through the uneven formation of undead as the sickle of the gardener weeding grass. Each and every skeleton and zombie standing in the way were consumed by fiery lashes coming from the chargers, turning their remains into ashes with burning sparks like a magic trick. No resistance was offered. As soon as the chargers came, most of the undead vanguard was swept clean and the chargers passed the western gate to the other side of the undead. Jax and the flame Atronach were still fighting. The gigantic Atronach was walking on two uneven legs, felt like it was falling, so it used its metal arm to support itself to the ground, dealing light casualties to the chargers. The city gate was opened and the defenders charged through, killing each undead they came through. They were advancing slowly and steadily, dealing with whatever the chargers didn't deal with. As soon as they passed the gatehouse fully, they formed a tight, arched formation together. Fatten was there among the Redguard men and women. She may have found herself in that situation, but no one paid heed to how young or ladylike she is. Other ladies were in the same formation as her too, and they were growling like beasts, ready to face whatever horror comes at them. Of course, the Battle of Jax and the towering flesh Atronach was an exception. On the chargers' front, they took a large distance away from the battle, then turned around again, this time to the rear towards the necromancers. "Get those whoresons! Redguards! Redguards!" The hunting charger, proud and domineering, gave their all to the charge and called for their ancestral power, the adrenaline rush. A mystical power few of the Redguards were blessed with gave them the edge in every open confrontation, and here it made them look like beasts. Their muscles bulged and their eyes brightened. Every bit of their instincts as warriors was hyphenated for the final charge to cut the head of the snake. The horses crossed the sandy field, heralding the end of the bitter fight. The necromancers recognized the threat of the chargers and panicked. "Why are the others not attacking from the south already?" a necromancer shouted. "Something is wrong, they don't seem to have even crossed the bay. Those trashes. Do something. Damn it. Help me, comrades. Control that Atronach with me." To face the charge, the necromancers had to turn to the only card capable of dealing with the chargers. Half of the necromancers leading the undead horde gave up their control and focused on the flesh Atronach instead, pulling it from the fight with Jax towards the chargers. "Hiya! Kill them!" The hunting chargers used their speed and superior strength to penetrate through the first defensive layer of the worm cult. The low-ranking worm cultists were slaughtered like rats, but the true head of the snake was the ones in the core of the formation, not too far away. Should the chargers reach them, this battle will be over. There was some hope seconds ago, but right now, the situation turned dire. That gigantic flesh Atronach turned around and chased after the hunting chargers. It wasn't fast, but its pace was wide, and soon it blocked the chargers' way. Then it started to rampage towards them. Even Jax, who was chasing the flesh Atronach midair, couldn't do anything at that point. "Disperse! Spread around!" Kareem shouted for his men to avoid the coming disaster. The chargers' formation was broken, and Kareem's protectors led him to the east, back towards the wall where the defenders at. "Your lordship, it is dangerous now. Order a retreat. Get them to safety." "They won't retreat unless you do, your lordship." The situation, that was in favor of the chargers, turned dire in a split of a second once the gigantic flesh Atronach started rampaging. Kareem and his men couldn't handle the situation, while the core members of the necromancers gained momentum and started firing spell to hunt down the chargers. 3 of the chargers were blinded by their adrenaline rush and launched themselves with their horses at the enemies, taking down a bunch each before getting surrounded and killed from all fronts. Damn it! Kareem saw the demise of the 3, and it got to him, but he wasn't dumb enough to fall here. He finally managed to reach the line of defenders at the western gate, but once he was almost there, the battle between Jax and the flesh Atronach heated once again, and Jax managed to damage the whole left shoulder part of the arm carrying the flail. Still, now that Jax was closer to the necromancers, they didn't spare him from their attacks. Jax was forced to retreat, but he was actually being baited. Once he reached a certain spot, he found himself in the trajectory of the Atronach's metal arm. Shit. Being a still target midair, the metal arm slapped Jax away towards the retreating chargers. He was falling like a meteor, and in his path was none other than the young Governor Kareem. "Kareem, be careful!" A shout from a familiar voice alarmed Kareem to his situation. He jumped off his horse to the side, and by the next second, Jax landed in an eruption. Kareem crashed to the ground and rolled around between the legs of the other horses, but he protected himself. He looked up and knew he was saved as soon as he saw what became of his horse. The defenders and the chargers ran and circled him, pulling him to retreat. "Kareem!" But that voice called for him again. He turned around frantically, trying to spot the owner of the voice. "Fatten! Fatten! I'm here!" A volunteer ran through the tight ranks, raising her sword and shield. Her helm fell off her head, and that's when Kareem spotted her. "Come!" In the tightness of the crowded defenders, the two young lovers squirmed their way to each other. Kareem reached out to her from the shoulders. "What are you doing here?" he asked with a shocked face. "I'm here for you," she said with a bright one, and touched his face. He was bleeding from his forehead and the side of his face. "Go back. Take her to the wall," he said to any of his guards, but he found himself strayed from them. "I'm not leaving you. We're in this together," she said with an offended face. "No, you must." He was about to say something when they all heard a call. "They are coming." Part 2. Everyone looked at the west at the same time. Now that the fight reached this point, the necromancers rallied the rest of their force. "Hold the lines. Shields. Spears and shields. Tight formation." Everyone started shouting and screaming. The situation they all wanted to avoid happened, as the undead charge has finally happened. One of the strategic basics in Tamriel is to never face a horde of undead head-on, not with cavalry or even war mammoths. The undead swarm is akin to a tsunami that can't be stopped. Kareem and Fatten had no time to talk as they joined the formation together, shoulder to shoulder. From the midst of the smoke nearby, a certain tall figure walked out, staggering. It was Jax, who was just blasted away by the Atronach. He was hurt by the fall and was holding his left arm near his body with his back aching. He saw the defenders and the chargers forming a defense formation behind him, and the dead swarming from distance in a deadly charge. Spells, arrows, and rocks flew from the city wall over his head to the undead horde, but there was no stopping it. The defenders saw Jax emerging, and from a closer look, they realized it was no legendary creature or a beast from Oblivion. The talks about his identity at the beginning of the battle were undetermined, but now he seemed like a normal minotaur, not that anyone cared at the moment. But in the next, this minotaur was the center of attention. He snorted like a bull, reinforcing himself with the flame aura, and started to act. Stomp, stomp, stomp. 3 stomps of his hooves crested 3 fire pools around him. He started to run, not towards any front but rather horizontally, each step covering 4 meters and causing a fire pool. With his hand, he was casting flame wall to the side, making a line of fire in the way. "Ha! You want to pass? Let's see if you can." Jax was in a good mood despite his injury. The fight against the flesh Atronach just now was blood boiling, and he felt his rage being all vented on an opponent that won't fall no matter how many blasts he could dish out. Being Jon's in turn, he has piled up a lot of stress as of late. He walked behind his wall of flame that reached 5 meters in height, feeling the steps of the horde coming from behind it. Once it came closer, the horde breached the flame wall with force, but anything that passed was scorched in the flame. Whatever survived the wall had to cross the pools, and no undead was strong against the fire. The first wave was all taken by Jax, making the defenders shiver from the power of that minotaur, The second wave started preaching the flame wall, and the necromancers were dispelling it. The undead piled on the fire pools, and the whole defensive array Jax created was over. But two things were gained. The undead charge was mostly absorbed, and reinforcements from the city joined the defenders on the gate. Kareem and Fatten reached the forefront of the formation and joined the elite force to face the coming undead. On the other hand, the necromancers lost most of their precious army and were in a tight spot. "We must retreat for now. We can't. The damages we're lost are insignificant. We still have the Flesh Monarch and our personal summons. But the southern team, they will be there. Have faith, comrade." The necromancers decided to bring out their trump cards, the summons from the ghost world. Void distorted as many undead started coming through. They were felt baleful, dangerous, and intimidating. Snort. Jax knew what is going on, but he was more worried about the flesh Atronak that was still marching slowly back to the battle, yet now he had to deal with those mummies. He cast the lava whip, summoning a large flaming whip with 3 endings that he kept swinging around, creating a large ring of fire. He also cast bound flame wings, and spread them widely without flying. And the undead charged. "Hold your positions!" Kareem shouted and coveted Fatten behind him. The clash was dire. Each undead around Jax was turned into sparks by the lava whip, but they still kept swarming. The mummies were strong but got blasted away by his whip. The only thing that stood to him were the bone colossuses. The rest of the undead clashed with the defenders, and the necromancers started casting corpse explosion at the cannon fodder undead, causing serious casualties to the defenders. "Hold the line. Don't stray from each other," Kareem shouted, but to no use. The panicked soldiers could barely keep themselves in formation after such a vile tactic used by the necromancers. Some of the brave ones started charging at the undead, trying to take those running bombs down before they explode in the crowd, even at the cost of their lives. The ones around Kareem and Fatten charged to protect him, yet he was pushed forward by them. "Kareem, wait!" Fatten couldn't help but run after him too. In less than a minute, the two found themselves in the middle of the fray. "Kareem!" she called as she lost visual of him. "Damn it! Fatten, stay with me!" Kareem ran to her from behind, and the two joined one another. The first skeleton that came towards them was blacked by her shield, then Kareem advanced and destroyed the skull by his sword. The chaotic situation became more messy, and the two started fighting back to back. It was dangerous, too dangerous for the two of them, as everything started making less sense. Zombies charging at them were rammed away by the rampaging Minotaur. He spread his bound flame wings and used them as weapons by slashing with them, or shields by joining them together. He would fly with them for a few meters and land the midst of any undead formation, obliterating it with his hooves. A skeleton jumped on Fatten and pushed her shield aside. The girl was about to lose her protection when Kareem managed to cover for her. She looked at him with a face overwhelmed by exhaustion, and he tried to fend for her, but behind him, a voice rang in her head. She didn't recognize it, but something told her that him is Kareem. She pulled him towards her and put the shield forward, then, crack! A flying lightning spell landed on her shield and made it explode in splinters. Luckily, she was fine. "Duck together!" Kareem was stunned by the sound of the spell, but Fatten heard the voice once again and pulled him down. In the following second, a flying axe went by over them. Shit! Kareem felt that he just escaped the clutches of the Grim Reaper. Looking towards the source of the lightning spell and the axe, the couple saw a mighty undead warrior, which is one of those premium undead summoned by the cultist, a mummy. This mummy belonged to a great Nord warrior that has fallen ages ago in battle. Right now, this seasoned warrior was marching to the couple with a short sword in hand. "Stand up, don't fight him head-on. You are no match for him." The voice rang inside Fatten's head again. "Who are you?" she shouted. "Fatten, I'm sure it is of no use asking about the identity of the undead. Kareem said as he started pulling her away from the sure death that is the mummy. No, Lord Governor. I'm not talking. She tried to say something but the voice spoke again. Governor? Wait, is he the governor? Wah. Yes, Kareem is the governor of Stros. Fatin replied to the voice. What are you saying? Is he a descendant of Izara? The voice asked hastily. Yes, Fatin replied. Pass me to the boy. Now. Pass you. Yes. Pass him. Pass the sword. There is no time. Hurry. As the voice urged her, Fatin simply stopped Kareem and put the sword in his hand. Kareem looked between her and the sword, yet he was about to urge her to keep running then. He suddenly stopped. The sword in his hand brightened. It brightened like the sword of a paladin. Fatin felt the strong power and presence coming from the longsword she just passed to Kareem. It gave off a shocking power and a holy aura. Kareem, whose face brightened up, felt the power surging inside him as he heard a voice ringing into his head. His aura, which was a flame aura, switched into a holy aura which he never trained before. It overtook all the different energies around him, and he moved faster than he ever could. Clank! In a single move, he blocked the sword of the mummy chasing them. Even his wounds started to heal and his power started to come back and increase. He was experiencing a miraculous moment. Cut. 2 moves were all that it took to bring down the mummy of the Nord warrior. Then Kyu. The voice of the Nord warrior being freed from his eternal servitude sounded near him and boosted his spirit. Kareem looked at all the undead around him, and his holy aura blasted around like a nova. Red Guards! He shouted, raising the sword high and marching forward. Behind him, Fatin picked a sword and threw her shield away. To his lordship! She shouted and rallied everyone around him. Follow the governor! Lord Kareem is advancing. Behind him! Every Red Guard fighting in this battle gathered after him in one final drill attack. Kareem took the forefront and spearheaded the assault. All mummies and necromancers standing in his way were either cut in half or beheaded. The holy sword finally landed in the hands of the hero. Zombies on the front. Cut. Mummies making a pincer attack. Bash, stab, slash. Worm knights blocking the way. Slice. The enemies fell one after the other to the Prince of Stros. It was until he reached Jax. Ha ha. Little man, that's a good skill you have. Jax called for him. Kareem looked to the side, seeing Jax handling more than a quarter of the undead on his own. He smiled wryly to the Minotaur, and together they pushed forward. The situation was a victory. No matter what, that charge of the defenders of Stros was invincible, but as the thing with all good things, it came to an end. They overlooked one gigantic detail that finally arrived at them. It was the towering flesh Atronak. Jax, Kareem, Fatin and all the defenders behind them looked up at the large flesh tower that raised its fused metal arm, aiming to smite them down. As there was no escape, there was no fear. It was do or die, now or never. Whatever attack comes, the answer of the united front would always be the same. Bring it on! Kareem shouted. This shout wasn't just for the flesh Atronak that is about to end them in one hit, but also to the Red Guards around him to untie their aura and stop the coming attack together. Hiya! The whole formation of fighters cried out, whether they were aura masters or not. It was known that the aura came with the voice, and some of those who didn't train their aura could actually feel it. It was a glorious moment as they all came in front of danger, but someone had to ruin it. It. You fucktards can't have all the fun without me. Jax, I won't let this pass if I miss that scene. I'll fucking bring you back to life and tie you to the carriage. Hearing that voice, Jax lost all the momentum and even his will to fight. He even slapped his own face and muttered, "Not now." A rider in ebony on a black Yokudan charger horse known as Jurgen entered the scene as fast as lightning. He passed in front of Jax and Kareem. jumped off the horse that exited the scene and stood in front of the army. A team of exceptional individuals was right on his heels, jumping off their Atronach horses. The man in ebony looked at the gigantic flesh Atronach and smiled widely. I would have cried tears of blood if I missed this party. Greed. He raised his hands to the side and called for a Greed that was on his shoulders as a cape. Greed moved on its own and entered Jon's gauntlets, Ozidal's evil first. Those gauntlets started to change in a strange scene. They started to grow bigger as if Jon's hands and firearms themselves were growing. The bizarre scene continued until each gauntlet became as large as an adult man. Ozidal's Titan Fists. Fortify Strength. Resist Magic. Magicka Sealing Chains. Flying Grip Greed Effect. He raised those large hands up and fixed his stance, looking at the gigantic flesh Atronach that was still raising his metal arm up. Now hit! And the metal arm descended. PayPal for gift. PayPal. me/eldokmizi. Discord. GG/GKCKVA7S. Chapter 472, The Siege of Stros Mkai, 5-6. By the powers I was granted. Another double chapter 'cause I can. Lots of love and hugs to our new patrons. At Jabez, at Longboarding Piper, is available on P4TRE0N. Part 1. As if a mountain was falling, the gigantic metal arm high in the air descended. Before it lands, its movements caused an incredible pressure that made everything in its way tremble. At the forefront, Jon was standing tall, raising his hands up, fusing Greed with Ozidal's evil fist to create Ozidal's Titan Fists. Those titanic hands were all what is there to receive the metal-fused right arm of the gigantic flesh Atronach. All were behind him. Isha, Mirren, Miranda, Jax, Governor Kareem, Fatten, the hunting chargers, and the local defenders. Madness! Kareem, the man who led the last charge of Stros Mkai, muttered while watching Jon, a complete stranger who out of nowhere, stepping between them and the flesh Atronach, demanding to receive the attack all by himself. Even the people around him were either in a storm hope or in a feral state, raising their hands up with Jon. Not madnesses! A little child following Jon's group spoke. This man stayed in a martial school for 8 months only to learn one move. Little Boethiah was standing there, and she knew better. She was not tense at all, knowing how the scene will unfold. Jon's actions, moves, pose, facial expressions, everything about him was nothing but firm. He wanted to take that attack so bad to test the move he learned. And as he wished, he got it delivered. Those who witnessed the scene from the back saw a man raising a pair of giant metal hands to receive a giant metal arm. The arm descended like the wrath of heavens, but tink. That's all what was heard from the anticipated clash. All they heard was the sound of metal clashing with metal. No devastation, no struggle, no counterattack. Just the two hands clashing with the arms, and the whole thing stopped. Those who turned their faces while gritting their teeth opened their eyes as they slowly turned their heads forward again. They believed it, they didn't believe it, they thought the time stopped, they thought the space halted, they thought reality broke. The people in the field, those on the walls, and even the necromancers were all silent as the dead. But those who expected more than this anticlimactic result were not disappointed at the end. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The land under their feet shook and shook hard. An earthquake in this kind of situation was either too good or too bad to be true. Yet those who could feel the power of that rumble realized one thing. That man standing over there carrying the whole weight of the metal arm of the flesh Atronach was at the center of the earthquake. This rumble caused everyone to think back about what just happened. The city was besieged, the defense was standing, the flesh Atronach appeared, the situation became helpless, a flying minotaur came for aid, the governor turned the tide, the chargers overtook the undead, the situation worsened, the governor led one last hopeful charge with the power of his magic sword, the blood of the Red Guards boiled, The flesh Atronach was about to end it all. Then that man showed up shouting and cursing, demanding to receive the attack, which he strangely stopped. Then for some reason, a random earthquake decided, hey, this looks like fun, I'll join up too. What the fuck? One man muttered. You've got to be fucking kidding me, said another. Fucking oblivion. And another said. It wasn't the people losing sanity, but completely the other way around. It was people regaining their goddamn minds. Standing this close to a battle of monsters? Who in their right mind would do that? Run. Now that someone said that, it sounded like the most reasonable thing to do. Everyone turned tail and ran. There is no point in staying here anymore. The primal instincts of the Animalia found its way to the mind of those highly evolved humans. The best action to take at that moment was to run and preserve their lives. The ones who stayed were the ones strong enough to handle these instincts. And the battle continued. The flesh Atronach raised its arm to reveal Jon, who was standing there, the same posture he was standing in. The only difference is, he was panting out of breath. That move is fucking insane, he said. Jon stayed in the Desert Wind Temple learning martial arts. He picked up some moves that he can execute with his aura, but his aim was to learn one thing, and one thing only. In the Gotfang Martial School, the school which Main Topaz learned from, the adepts train on controlling the flow of the impactful forces through themselves and how to channel it. Channeling the impact is no simple thing by any means. What Jon did just now was to absorb all the kinetic force from the flesh Atronach's attack, direct it through his body while maintaining his own static force through magicka and aura to channel all that to the ground without harming his body. As long as he has enough inner energy to handle the outside energy, he could deal with whatever physical attack coming at him. And that was the martial skill Jon spent months to learn. Powers. Gotfang's stance. Channeling impacts and momentum. A picture in Discord gallery. Disbelief didn't last long. Those necromancers who realized that Jon had blocked the attack wanted to retaliate as soon as they can. They manipulated the flesh Atronach to direct another attack. Not happening. Jon aimed his left giant gauntlet towards the pillar-like metal arm of the flesh Atronach and activated the greed effect enchantment, Flying Grip. TSSS swash. The grip of Jon's left gauntlet was shot like a bolt towards the Atronach's metal arm and grappled to it, an evil sealing chain extended between Jon and the grip. As the gigantic flesh Atronach pulled its arm up, Jon was pulled from the ground. He also started to reel himself up by the chain. Ha! That's the spirit. Big thing, I'll murder the shit out of you. Sheogorath. Jon said and called for the blessing of Sheogorath. His heart raced faster. His red hair glowed with power and his smile reflected the maniac thoughts that he was having as a side effect from the blessing of the mad god. He detached the left grip from the Atronach's metal arm and shot the right grip to its face, then pulled himself closer at a high speed. Say ah! He raised his left hand and with the oversized gauntlet on it, he cast his favorite close-ranged spell. Is it a bird? Is it a plane? No, it's a super mega thunder cookie. Quang. The hit landed with a metallic ring right on the hideous face of the flesh Atronach, sending away its first lower jaw. It had multiple. The undead tried to balance itself and get of Jon with his other imbalanced hand, but quang quang quang. Jon started punching with the two great hands, making holes in the face of the Atronach. The Atronach shook itself and tried to get rid of Jon, but the latter shot one of the grips up to the forehead and left the area for Pride that was hovering and casting magic on its own. Meteor. The expert-level flame spell landed on the face of the Atronach with a loud bang, completely getting rid of the lower jaw area. The tongue of the creature dangled down uncontrollably in a very grotesque manner. Ha ha. Serves you right. Under the wild effect of the blessing of the mad champion, Jon didn't cease his attacks, aiming to destroy the face of the flesh Atronach. with the Atronach desperately trying to shake Jon off. The latter didn't stay in one spot and kept moving all over the place. Forehead? Smash. Cheekbones? Must have hurt. Eyes? Whoops, that looked important. By the time the face of the Atronach was completely disfigured more than it once was, Jon stood above its head and shot one grip towards the forehead. He then ran to the back of the Atronach, used Xikil's boots of the Apostle to run in the air, then shot the other grip towards the ground. Jax, now! Jon shouted while reeling the chains of the two grips at the same time. The Atronach resisted being pulled back by Jon, who was hung between the two chains of his gauntlets. In the shadow of the Flesh Atronach, the core members of the Necromancer's force felt that the Flesh Atronach was being pulled towards them. Run! That's a madman! We are not his opponents, we must report to the elders. Retreat! The Necromancers didn't even bother to attack Jon. At this rate, they witnessed Jon's strength and were sure that they are no match for him. Also, judging by the direction he came from, it was safe to assume that the other team of Necromancers in the south was annihilated by him. Back to Jon, he was desperately trying to bring down the Atronach with his raw power, but even if he utilized the weakness of the Flesh Atronach, which is its face, there was no way it can be done with few attacks. That thing was built to endure. And that's where Jax comes to play. On the other side of the Atronach, the fiery Minotaur was flying in the air with the bound flame wings. He has dealt with most of his injuries, so he could use his two hands to dual cast a spell while rising up in the air. That spell was an ordinary fireball, but under Jon's teaching, Jax was very capable of amplifying spells by overcharging it with magicka. The spell started to grow bigger and bigger on his hands as he reached the broken jaw of the Atronach. Eat this! And Jax shot the spell in the open mouth of the Flesh Atronach. The whole head of the Flesh Atronach brightened as it started to swell then. With a booming sound, a spectacular explosion happened. The towering Flesh Atronach twitched hard as its body lost power. Losing the head was not the problem to a normal undead, but a synthesized Atronach needs a core to operate, and it was best to hide it under the thick bones of the skull. In the lore, there are Daedric Atronachs and non-Daedric ones. Daedric ones are the normal, flame, frost, shock, and variations, while the non-Daedric are actually golems. With the effect of Jon's grappling gauntlets, the Atronach started collapsing backward. Jon, who was in the way, hurriedly teleported to the other side, while those of the Necromancers who didn't escape fast enough were leveled under the Flesh Atronach. Looking back at his handiwork, Jon saw a large cloud of dust rising up where the Flesh Atronach should be lying. Man, that took some time to bring down, Jon said while returning his gauntlets back to normal. You want to do it faster than that? You have already given those Redguards the fright of their lives, Mirren said while dusting off his robes. That will make it easier to communicate with them, Jon said. More undead are coming. Little Boethiah pointed forward. There was clearly a number of zombies and skeletons passing the dust and running towards Port Hunding. The Necromancers are escaping and using their undead as decoy. Useless, Miranda said while raising her bow of shadows, ready to deal with those small fries. Let's not do that. Jon stopped her. Nefertiti will track those Necromancers and we'll leave the undead to not make them suspect that we're watching them. Also, the city defenders would find it fun to bully the last bit of undead to regain their confidence. The team decided to end the action here today. Part 2. It was about dawn when the whole thing was over. The corpse of Flesh Atronach was lying there waiting to be burned so no diseases spread out. The decoy undead headed towards the city wall. Jon and his team arrived at the city, and the young Governor Kareem was managing the aftermath from his post on the wall. Jon walked up the city wall followed by his team. No one stood in his way, but rather most people took distance from him. Such a monster who stopped the pillar-like metal arm of a gigantic Flesh Atronach is by no means human. Once he topped the wall, he looked left and right until his eyes landed on Kareem. "Hey, you are that boy Jax talked about?" Jon spoke loudly. Kareem and his men looked at Jon with tensed faces. No matter how much he helped them, they were fearful of him nonetheless. "Sir, my name is Kareem, governor of Stros." Kareem was less tense in front of Jon. "Gee, governor? I just call you, never mind." Jon brushed it off. "Jax is?" Kareem didn't mind it and inquired about the name. "Oh, tall idiot cowhead loves fire," Jon said. "The hero Minotaur?" Kareem's face brightened. Jon faked a laugh. "Yeah, that bastard who didn't report to me when there was a fun thing going on here." "Where is the hero Minotaur?" Behind Kareem, Fatten popped out asking. "He's healing," Jon said, raising his hand to imply that Jax is in the ring cube. But no one understood it, of course. Jon looked around and spotted the scene down the wall where the undead were gathering trying to climb the wall. They weren't anything important now that their masters abandoned them. "Sorry for not dealing with those. Had a good reason." "It's okay, sir. You are our savior who took down that abomination. We owe you a great debt. By the way, would you please honor us with your name?" Kareem said. "Oh, where are my manners? I'm known as Krylin, a mercenary," Jon said. "Oh, it sounds familiar. Hey, what is that sword?" Jon noticed the sword dangling from Kareem's hip. In Jon's eyes, it was a fancy longsword with a great design, but what he noticed the most was the magic in the sword. It felt like this sword had many secrets. Truth is, after that sword was held by Kareem, it no longer became old and dull, but now it brightened and smoothened, looking like the sword of someone rich. It is the sword of my family. It lost for generations, but it finally found its way to me. My ancestors can finally rest now that it is back," Kareem said. "Amazing. It looks very old judging by the carvings. How old is it?" Jon asked out of professional curiosity. "I don't know, but it was said that this sword was passed down by the first from my family, ancestor Izara," Kareem said. "Izara? Like the Izara? The sister of Cyrus the Redguard?" Jon questioned. "Yes. You know the tale?" "In 3D in details, I mean. Izara and Cyrus are a sister and a brother who lived 800 years ago during the Tiber Wars. They fought for the independence of Hammerfell against the new Emperor Tiber Septim and ended up with a good peace treaty with him, which was favorable to Hammerfell. Cyrus is the player character from the Elder Scrolls Redguard, a very early game in the franchise. A sword related to that tale is only one sword. The Soul Sword. The Soul Sword is a shimmering longsword imbued with the soul of Prince Ader following his death in 2E864. Aside from being a powerful weapon, the sword can move of its own accord and allows Ader's spirit to communicate with the wielder. Seeing such a sword is like getting a glimpse of history. Your Lordship! Your Lordship! As Jon was conversing with Kareem, some men started running on the wall towards Kareem. These were Zayed, Hamad, and other rich and nobles who were here for many reasons. Hamad checked on his daughter and pulled her towards him. Zayed tried to pass Jon, but the latter was too large to notice the short fatty. "Hey you! Move aside! Who do you think you are?" Zayed shouted at Jon. "Krylin, a mercenary," Jon said. "Humph!" Zayed snorted and turned to Kareem. "Your Lordship, thank the gods for your safety." Zayed was shaking in front of Kareem. "Thank you, advisor." Zayed turned to Fatten afterward and approached her. "Young lady, when you ran from the docks a while ago, you took my family's sword." Zayed was speaking in a low tone. What?" she questioned. "Nothing much really, is it with you? Did you lose it?" Zayed asked softly, but Fatten has already seen through something. "No, I didn't lose it." Fatten realized something was wrong about this fatso, so she acted along. She picked an old longsword with some similarities to the sword she carried and handed it over to him. The man snatched it rather than taking it and retreated a few steps away. Fatin then realized something was amiss. According to what Kareem told her, there was another story to this soul sword involving the late generations of his family. The soul sword carrying the soul of Prince Ader have mostly reacted to the descendants of Azara or the descendants of Cyrus, thus, it was proper to only be carried by them. Also, this sword has his political views as it supports the Crown's faction. More to that, it prefers people with power and potential. The thing about it is that it became a symbol of power and the badge of a ruler in Stros. Thus an incompetence governor once created a replica to claim he hears the voice of Prince Ader. Many replicas were created later by some generations of Kareem's family until they started to decline and the real soul sword disappeared at some point of time. Knowing this and that, Fatin whispered a few words to Kareem, who was conversing with the curious mercenary Krylon. Kareem's face stiffened and he looked at his vizier Zayed with sharp eyes. Even a 7-year-old can understand what happened right now. Jon could hear the whispers of Fatin, and he looked at Kareem curiously waiting for his reaction. Kareem put his hand on the hilt of the sword in his hip, and closed his eyes for a moment before have a momentary sly smile. "Zayed?" Kareem called. "Yes, my lord," Zayed said while keeping the old sword in his robe, walked closer with a sweaty face. "That's your family's sword?" Kareem asked, pointing at the sword Zayed was desperately hiding. Zayed looked left and right while swallowing his saliva and nodded with wary expressions. Kareem then opened his hand towards Zayed. "May I?" he said. Zayed felt like his head was getting light and his knees were losing power, but he hardened up his face and replied, "I am sorry, my lord. This sword is an old thing with obscure powers. It is a miracle that Lady Fatin used it without hurting herself." Zayed claimed. "Obscure powers? That sword is not even enchanted." Out of somewhere, Jon appeared behind Zayed and patted the man's shoulder. Zayed saw a Nordic Goliath standing next to him with a suffocating presence. He felt that his shoulder from just now was about to turn into dust under that man, but what's on stake was much more important than surrendering here. What does a brute like you know about magic swords?" Zayed retorted, but later felt that he shouldn't have tried his luck this far. "Oh, my sweet summer child," Jon said. "Well, other than being a master enchanter and knowing how to do that." Jon used greed to transfer Azadil's evil fists to Azadil's titan fists. That covered the whole view of Zayed, then returned them to normal. "Other than that, I don't know much about enchanting, right?" Jon said with a smug smile. Zayed couldn't help but be on the verge of collapsing with a fine hint from Jon's tyrannical aura. "Zayed?" Kareem called once again, "May I?" To Kareem's hanging hand, Zayed couldn't help but offer the sword he has with a shaking hand. Jon wanted to see what happens next. Kareem took the sword and looked at it, making a hum, then a theatrical act started. "The soul sword of Prince Ader? Wow. This is the lost relic that guided my family. Zayed, you found it? Oh! The sword is speaking to me." "What? Zayed's ancestors stole it." "Impossible, but it makes sense. Zayed is from the forebears, could it be?" "No. I am shaken." "And my lord." Zayed wanted to retreat as Kareem turned to him, but he found Jon behind him. "It seems like I need to punish you, Zayed and all of your family," Kareem said. "Wait." Zayed stopped and raised his hand. "Lord Kareem, think about this carefully. You can't handle the opposition of the forebears if something happened to me. Even if you have allies in Sentinel, they won't forgive it if one of their own was killed by a crown." It seemed like Zayed wasn't a dumb ball and used the political bargaining chip. Kareem stopped and looked with sharp eyes at Zayed. "If it is about the forebears, I am not even worried about them. And in these times of great distress, who is going to care about a tiny lord like you, Zayed?" Kareem was willing to seal Zayed's fate here and now, that's why he acted extreme. But there was someone whose whole character was based on the extreme itself. Jon simply threw the dirty vizier from the battlements with a light push. Why? Every single person who witnessed that was utterly speechless. Jon just murdered an official by throwing him off the wall. Those who looked where Zayed fell saw him sinking in the remnants of the undead horde gathered under the wall. Now that what's done is done, let's talk real business here, guys. Miss, I'll be borrowing that guy, but because it is getting dangerous, I want you to answer some questions. Jon spoke to Fatten. Okay. Do you like this guy and would want to spend your ever after with him? I do. Fatten nodded. And you, Governor? Do you love that girl and would want to spend your ever after with her? Of course I do, Kareem said firmly. Young love. I always wanted to say that next part. Jon became all excited. Ahem. Then by the powers I was granted from Akatosh, Talos, Kine, the All-Maker, Shiagarath, Azura and Hermias Mora, I pronounce you man and wife. You can kiss already. PayPal for gift. PayPal. Me/Eldokmizi. Discord. GG/GKCKVA7S. Chapter 473 Jon and Kareem. Next chapter available on P4 Tray 0N. The Mansion of the Governor of Stros Mkai. Master Krylon, please refrain from wedding people without any notice. You are our savior and all, but the inner politics is in chaos now, said Malik, the city captain and the governor's current second in command. I was only helping. Jon raised his shoulders. And the thing with the previous vizier, how do you expect us to explain this to Sentinel? I don't. So you save our city, murder the vizier and wed the governor for just. I don't think I can process this anymore. The one-sided argument where Captain Malik kept nagging Jon for answers was not progressing at all as Jon kept a full-on indifferent attitude. I think I should thank you, Master Krylon. After a deep breath, the young governor spoke. My lord. Malik didn't seem to understand his lord either. Kareem raised his hand and looked closely at Jon. You seem to be experienced in politics, Master Krylon, Kareem remarked. Am I? Yes, you knew I am a crown. You got rid of my forebear vizier because you thought if I kept him alive or killed him, I'll face forebear opposition, and you have plans that you don't want the opposition to disturb. Well, in times of chaos, things happen like vizier falling from the city wall while putting his all to protect the city. Jon feigned ignorance. That's merciless, Master Krylon. You expect the forebears to believe that? You don't need to explain anything to the forebears, they already suspect you. Your lordship should focus on the public, make the rumors run around. There is no cat too big to be pat. First time I hear that saying. I just came up with it. Oh, I see. You really are good politics. Kareem smiled. Jon raised his shoulders, not confirming or denying, but then he smiled. I think you should focus on your wedding at the moment, Jon said. Kareem's face froze and he became speechless. Was it all right to put the governor in such a situation? Asked Isha, who was also attending the meeting. It was tempting at that moment, but you still can't say it is not a good thing, Jon said. How so? The wedding of a governor should be blessed by the highest authority. Isha retorted. How? Are you questioning my authority? Jon looked at her with a serious face. I was talking about the king of Sentinel or a religious sect. Oh, so that had to happen. Come on. If we let those guys wed this poor guy, they would have made it political as shit. At least he married the same way I did. And how is that? After valiantly defending his city from evil, leading his people to victory, then kicking a marriage off right after. I was actually going to do the ceremony after the victory and go with the proper procedure, Kareem said with a disheartened face. Believe me, I knew. That's why I had to skip the whole thing. I heard you Redguards can have weddings that last for a week, Jon said. So that was your aim all along, Captain Malik shouted. Duh. I see. Kareem massaged his temples while thinking, so all you wanted was for me to skip the ceremony. Just merge it with the victory celebration. And make it a day. Jon demanded. What is your aim? Your chargers and some ships? Jon said, raising 3 fingers to Kareem. You're kidding, right? The city just almost faced annihilation and you want our support in an expedition. Captain Malik said. You can take another extra day, but remember, Jon turned to Kareem, we are running short on time. Not all parts of Hammerfell will be as lucky as Stros, Governor. You can clear your island from necromancers, but more will come if you don't sail to the mainland with me. I am not short on manpower, but I need Redguard manpower and… Jon tried to pick the next words more carefully while pointing at Kareem. A figurehead? Kareem asked. Didn't want to use that word, but yes, I need someone to appear as the savior of the day. Jon was blunt and didn't hide the fact that he has a big ulterior motive. You are not honest, outsider. You saved us for your personal gain. While we want to feel thankful and lucky, your demands need more explanation. Kareem didn't budge in front of Jon. Jon rested back on his seat and looked at Kareem with a smile hidden behind his solemnness. There are circles of powers in this world, political circles, cultist circles, Daedric circles. What is attacking Hammerfell is one of those circles, Jon said. We are aware of the worm cult, if that's what you are referring to, Kareem retorted. Well, in our case, the worm cult is a part of a bigger circle. What are you talking about? Jon sighed and decided to reveal some parts of the story to Kareem and his aides. He spoke about the involvement of the Daedric princes Clavicus Vile, Periite and Malakath, as well as the Worm King Menemarco in some sort of a plan. Each Daedra had an agent, but were all rid off except one who is currently with the Worm Cult, and doing this for the aim of reincarnating the Worm King in his body. Jon also claimed that he chased the agents of the Daedric princes across Morrowind, Cyrodiil, Hammerfell, Elsewhere, and Valenwood all the way back to Hammerfell and Stros, only to find the Worm Cult up and running in a plan to power the reincarnation of their god. As Jon's identity was no secret among the Daedric princes supporting Menemarco and the last agent, he will be faced with direct assaults the moment they discover his whereabouts in the mainland. That is why he needed a proxy for his campaign, or rather, a figurehead to take the credit and gather the support of the Redguards. Also, if he can hide from the Daedric princes as much as he could, this will be a major win. I see. Kareem muttered and looked at Jon with a pale face. To be honest, I find it hard to believe anything you just said, but in times like these, things are particularly hard to understand. Jon looked at Kareem, who went in a state of deep thinking. Give me some time, Kareem said. I'll prepare a celebration for the city and send my raiders to clean up the rest of the necromancers. I think we will need your help. After all, we can't leave this city if the necromancers aren't rooted out from its surroundings. And from its inside as well, Jon said. You are right. Kareem stood up and left the meeting room alongside his aide. Before he exits, he turned around and asked Jon, if you want to act covertly with me as the figurehead, what role will you play? You're young and talented court wizard. Someone who has never appeared in the scene before and spent his early youth devoted to the arcane arts. Jon said. Ah ha ha ha. Kareem couldn't help but laugh. You indeed have a reply for everything. Kareem went away laughing with a head full of thoughts, and Jon returned to thinking as well. You never considered having this plan before? Isha said. Yes, he replied. What changed? A lot. I never thought I would meet a distant relative of a hero, a bloodline so close to the chaotic motions of PSJJJJ, of fate. I don't get a word. Neither do I. Fate is not a thing you understand, but being involved with it brings you insight. I need to see Boethiah. Jon stood up from his seat and walked out of the meeting room. They were invited to stay in the historical Governor Palace of Port Hunding. Jon didn't turn that offer down and got his group a nice place to stay for the night. It was the second day after they arrived in Stros, and they were still thinking of how to root out the cult. Jon and Isha walked into the guest house where the rest of the group were resting. Miranda was healing the wounds Jack suffered. Mirren was babysitting Boethiah, who decided to take a ride on him, and for some reason, Nefertiti joined her to play. "You guys look like you're having fun," Isha said as she decided to bully Mirren with the little girls. "How are your wounds? Ready for another battle?" Jon checked on Jax. Jax was touched as he replied, "Yes, master. Good. I was having some trouble thinking straight, so I think we should have a proper spar before the night's over." Jax felt like the bright palace became so dark, heartless and cold. "He will be needing mental consolation," Miranda said. "There are female minotaurs on the mainland. Until then, you have to spar out your mental issues like a proper man," Jon said and patted Jack. He left the poor minotaur and headed to the two girls playing with Mirren's hair. "Babysitting looks painful," Jon said. "I think your cat is acting like a brat because she's seeing someone with her age acting like a brat as well," Mirren said, displaying his tough side. "Good, I'll be relieving you from your duties then," Jon said while picking up the two girls. "Nefertiti, did you follow the necromancers to their hideout?" Jon asked Nefertiti. "Yes, Human. A big island in that direction." She pointed to the west. "The Isle of Ngasta. Thought as much. I guess the hunting chargers and their governor will use ships either way," Jon said. "The Isle of Ngasta is a cursed place that used to be inhabited by the Slode necromancer Ngasta. Slodes are a race of beastfolk that comes from the coral kingdoms of Thraz in the Etheric Ocean. The easiest way to describe them is the slugfolk. A vile and evil race. Jon didn't think the Slodes are involved in this labor, but he had to confirm from Boethiah. "There are Slodes in the worm cult, but that has nothing to do with the current affairs of Stros, she said. "Then, nothing really is threatening Stros at the moment. Right now, you are the strongest living organism in this ecosystem. You should assist the Redguard to clean the isle from necromancers while the young governor has his time celebrating and legalizing his marriage." Jon and Boethiah held this conversation in the balcony of the palace. Jon was looking down at the gardens, and she was sitting on a chair eating from some sweets that were spared to her by Nefertiti. Jon nodded, but his head was still thinking of many scenarios of how can this go wrong. "So, once we head to the sea, where should we land?" he asked. "Arania didn't tell you." "Nope, she stayed back in Saintsport with your merry little cult. The soul snare is making long-distance divinations a bit hard, but as far as we can tell from the voices, our friend Zane headed out to Hagod, the westernmost city in Hammerfell. So we go after him?" he asked. "Of course not. Let's go to a completely different place. He must be plotting destruction and death, so jumping in his turf like that is plain stupidity. Going to the east will secure your governor more allies to march with him west," she said. "Sometimes I forget you are still a child," Jon said with a sigh. "Sometimes I do too." "Boethiah sounds like a mouthful," Jon said. She tilted her head. "I'll be calling you Beth from now on." "You're giving me a name. Does that mean you will teach me?" "I'll decide after the labor. Right now, I'm deciding whether or not I should kidnap Kareem's gardener." As Jon said, it was indeed true that the garden of this palace was something to behold. Not like that crippled garden from the Blue Palace of Solitude. It was a peaceful night under the damning pale sky affected by the soul snare. The next morning, Jon headed off with the commander of the Chargers to wipe out the necromancers in the Isle of Ngasta. The expedition was successful and Jon torched the necromancers ablaze, while taking the anchorite of the worm cell as a prisoner and gaining invaluable information from interrogating him. Names, locations, plans. It confirmed the divination Beth came up with regarding the movements of the worm cult. A day later, the wedding of Kareem and Fatin was legalized and the whole warband of Stros was gathered in the palace to hear the decision of the governor of Stros. PayPal for gift. PayPal. me/Eldokmizi. Chapter 474 The Visions. Big thanks to @Crazy8. Next chapter is available on P4Tray0N. Heroism, mainly a form of reverence towards an individual who is celebrated by people for a sort of achievement that extends between military conquests, saving lives, and living by a personal code of honor. Such people would be much appreciated in a time of mayhem and disaster such as the current times in Hammerfell. The rise of the Order of the Black Worm was an opportunity for such heroes to start appearing and bring about peace and order. Earlier this morning, Governor Kareem gathered 1,000 warriors in the garden of his palace and spoke of what lies in front of him. He gathered them in his garden, offered them food and drink, invited every bard and muse in the isle, and stood on a balcony overlooking the island with Fatin beside him and a tall mage in an ebony plate standing behind him. O men, it has been 2 days since we ended the bitter siege. With your struggle we persisted, and to your honor we drink. Thanks to Master Mage Krylin, who came to us in the hour of need, we lived to see another day. Thanks to that, I spared no effort and pushed forward for a hasty but satisfying wedding. While I was acting the groom, the good news reached me that you rooted out all the necromancers in Stros with Master Krylin. You are victorious, you deserve the rewards and the rest, but you haven't achieved much. Our trials have just begun. Kareem picked the sword on his hip and rested it on the baluster of the balcony. You are taking the right choice. The voice of his family's guardian, Prince Ader, echoed in his head. Kareem looked forward and saw the men staring at him with wills of steel. He assured himself and proudly spoke. Our duty is not over. Stros may have survived, but other places are still fighting. 1,000 hunting chargers may not be enough to save every part in Hammerfell, but let's be a welcome change for the good, for the better, and victory over the dread lords. If we won and the whole Hammerfell was swallowed by the dead, we achieved no victory. Under that grim pale sky we achieved no victory. O men, remember the words of our brightest ancestor, Frandar Hunding, be resolute, fear no sacrifice and surmount every difficulty to win victory. And this is the way we fight. Our ships are strong, our arrows are swift, our blades are sharp, our steeds are fast, and as a blessing from Hunding, the sole sword of Prince Ader returned to us, we even have a master wizard on our side. What more do we need? Tell me, what more do we need? Kareem spoke to them, and every warrior howled, raising their swords and shouting with him. Among his chargers, this young governor was surely popular. For one final motivation, Kareem drew the sole sword, lifting it up. Raise our banner high. The times of noble deeds are upon us. And the banner of Stros was raised. It was a sword pointing down and a crown over it, all on a circle of swords. This sword is a reference to the sole sword, the crown is a reference to the crown's faction, and the circle of swords is a reference to the Book of Circles. Written by Frandar Hunding, the most accomplished sword master in history. Jon watched from behind Kareem until he was satisfied with the reaction of the warriors. He felt like going back to Winterhold and going on a few marches and training sessions with his dare troopers. Those rascals must be growing fat now that he has been away for almost a year. Jon walked away and arrived at the corner of the garden where his group was gathered. Beth, previously called Little Boethiah, was telling some sort of a story to the others, grasping their attention. What are you babbling about? Jon asked. She is telling us the story of how you got the name Dare, Mirren said. Ah, the good old times. Jon smiled. Jon was about to join the gathering, but he was called. Master Krylin. Looking back, it was Kareem and Fatten. "Governor! Lady Fatten! How can I help you?" Jon stood up. "We would like to thank you again for assisting us 3 times already. We are looking forward to our cooperation in the next campaign." Fatten said, "You are welcome, my lady." Jon thanked her. Jon has helped Stros 3 times indeed, first with the siege, then with rooting out the necromancers, then with getting rid of the gigantic corpse of the flesh Atronach earlier this morning. He even gifted a suit of armor to Kareem as a gift for his wedding, one of the best joint works between Wulfr's smithing and Jon's enchanting. "We do not have anything to reward you with, Master Krylin, so please accept this gift from my household," Kareem said as 4 servants came while carrying a large object. It was a large book, gilded cover and a fancy texture, with a title saying, "The Book of Circles by Frandar Hunding." Is the full version of the Book of Circles that was owned by my family's line of governors since the ages of Tiber Septim and ancestors Cyrus and Azara. I have heard that Master Krylin is not just a mage but also a swordsman, so I am gifting this hoping it would be of use," Kareem said. Jon and his group got their eyes open wide after seeing the book, not for its gilded cover of a catchy name but for its true value. For Jon, as a collector, he surely has a version of the Book of Circles, but to get the full version, that's a one-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The Book of Circles was written by Frandar Hunding in order to pass on his life-long insights and knowledge. For Redguards, it is an enormous part of their culture and everyday life. Each household in Hammerfell has an alcove by its hearth just big enough to hold a copy of the Book of Circles in honor of Hunding. Here is the fun part. The book is regarded as the encyclopedia of swordsmanship as it contains 38 grips, 750 offensive and 1,800 defensive positions, and nearly 9,000 moves essential to sword mastery. Jon walked over to the book and smiled, not waiting to carry it. This version was copied by Cyrus himself among many other copies. One of them was gifted to Tiber Septim and another was kept here. It was a tradition that every governor who rules Stros would make a copy by his own hand to prove the willpower of leadership. Kareem said. "It is priceless," Jon said. "Well, it is supposed to be priceless, but no one really was able to open it." Kareem started explaining something, but Jon paid no heed. He was excited for such a rare thing to be added in his collection, so he extended his hands about to touch the cover, but as soon as he did, everything around him darkened. It was pitch black, cold and bone-shivering. Jon looked around him as he felt an unfathomable presence gaze down at him. He felt weak like an insect. It was all too sudden. Jon Dare, who never knew fear, felt his soul shaking and his cold sweat making everything on him wet. It was dark, but all of a sudden, fire. Fire was everywhere. The whole darkness was burning, and he felt more fear than before, as if this flame will consume him, fire main or not. His throat became dry from the heat of the fires, but his sweat was still cold. Then it appeared. It showed its face to him. From the darkness, a colossal creature emerged, swaggering in its red scales, in its strong body, in its overbearing aura. A dragon. The dragon looked down on Jon. Jon felt weak for the first time in years. Helpless, fearful, pressured, but he didn't panic. He looked up at the dragon eye to eye, and as if the latter was saying, "How dare you look at me?" Jon became blinded with anger. It was then when he let loose of his frightening tyrannical aura. Shatter. And the whole darkness shattered. There was no darkness, no fires, no dragon. It was just Jon in the garden of the palace with everything around him as it was. The only difference is, he was the center of all attention for some reason. He looked around as the others were eyeing him with strange eyes, but not exactly him, it was his direction. But no one is around him. "Wow, did you feel that?" Fatten was the first to speak. "Yes." Kareem nodded. For a second it felt like we were back at the final hour of the siege all over again. Jon looked around him and felt the strange phenomenon. All were speaking about something as if they were back in some sort of a fight or something. It took them a few seconds after they realized it was just their imagination. Anyway, I was saying that no one could open this book. They say its cover was crafted from the scales of the dragon that Cyrus slew under this very palace. Naphthalargus. Jon muttered. Yes, that's the name of the dragon. The important thing is, Kareem tried to continue his fervent speech but Fatin cut in. Kareem. Yes. Look. She pointed towards Jon's hand where he was touching the book. Both Jon and Kareem, as well as the ones around, looked to see that Jon has already opened the cover, which was known that no one has ever opened it. Kareem's jaw dropped. For 8 centuries, this book was never opened, and those who tried to open it were all left with trauma for days until they forgot about it. It was a treasure and an item of legacy, but it also was foretold that the ones who open that book are the ones who are acknowledged by it. It was a shock for Kareem, as his ancestors had already given up about the book and considered it something akin to a sword stuck in stone, but no one actually did it, until someone did it. Jon, on the other hand, was taken aback by the book itself. Its cover was made of the scales of Naphthalargus, the imperial dragon of Tiber Septim. Naphthalargus, whose real name is Naphthalar, was a red dragon who often allied with mortals for his own protection, such as King Casimir II, the Dragon Guard on 2 different occasions, and lastly Emperor Tiber Septim when Naphthalargus started working as a mercenary dragon in the employ of Tiber Septim during the conquest of Tamriel. Naphthalargus was a proud soldier and a loyal vassal, causing him to be considered a jewel of the imperial crown. He is the very same dragon that is decorating the symbol of the mightiest empire in the world. Naphthalargus was killed by Cyrus 8 centuries ago, but as no Dragonborn was its slayer, Naphthalargus is not really dead. Jon felt like his second, technically third, visit to Hammerfell was becoming more thrilling than he had ever thought. A book of swordsmanship covered by the scales of a dragon. Now that manly book felt like something that can buff anyone with testosterone to the point where Mirren may actually grow chest hair. Jon accepted the gift, knowing this will add some more fun twists to his fate. Later that day, the ships of Port Hunding were packed with 1,000 charger and their horses. Jon was on the flagship of the governor of Stros reading from the first pages of Cyrus' Book of Circles. Enthralled by the refined text and the original insights of Frandar Hunding, while feeling the texture of the dragon scale over the cover, Jon felt like reading the best book ever. This book was big. Not just in size, but its content was written in a very small text to fit the whole insights in. It is said that the way of the sword, the art of sword singing, was lost after the Redguard abandoned this book. It returned back over time, but Jon wasn't interested in the concept of the sword singing in general, but rather the archetype of the swordsman. He read and read without realizing the time. He also didn't realize that his hunger for power grew another fold. Lately, Jon was stuck in the early Flame Dragon Heart stage in his training ever since he left Morrowind. After coming face to face with the remnants of the dragon's soul stuck in the cover of the book, Jon regained his feeling of being weak once again, and he started meditating without realizing. He was breaking free from the bottleneck. Meanwhile, Beth was sleeping not too far away from him. She shut her eyes tightly and saw a dream. A spear, 3 swords, a ship with red sails. She saw 2 men fighting in the desert, each was on the brink of falling apart. One was carrying a spear with the shape of a cobra to its blade, and his limbs were all broken. The other was carrying a sickle sword and protecting someone. It didn't feel like Hammerfell, but the man with the spear was definitely Zane, judging by his serpent spear. The other man looked out of place. She saw the demise of Zane on the hands of a complete stranger. PayPal for gift. PayPal. me/Eldokmizi. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.